My toxic entitled friend is constantly antagonistic towards my family and my children, as she is always asking for money and basically implying that my family is distracting me from giving her exactly what she wants. And so, after a really toxic remark she made about my future kid, I decided to get some revenge by literally cutting her out of my life in a way that she will never find me ever again. Here's what happened. So I ended a very long-term friendship with someone I called my best friend because it became glaringly obvious that she only had time for me when she needed money or help. I ended it abruptly and without explanation after she said one of the most callous things I've ever heard from someone who claimed to care about me. For a bit of context, about 3 years ago, I became a mother, and that's around the time when she stopped showing up for me, constantly making excuses and telling me she had other plans. I was always the person who could show up at her house even when I lived an hour away, but once I moved within a 3-mile radius of her, she never had time for me. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and she makes more than my husband does, and her bills are about 50% less than ours. I have urged her to work on budgeting and making a plan for savings, but she says I'm making her feel bad about her spending and just shuts me out. She knows that my husband and I have worked really hard to get our credit scores over 700. We put money into savings, and we've been really responsible with our finances. So when I would tell her that I can't help her out, she goes heavy on the guilt tripping, insinuating that I should be helping her because she knows we have money saved, and simply won't talk about anything other than how her financial problems are going to cause her to completely break down. And then at that point, she becomes hysterical. In the last year alone, I've bailed her out of car repossession, having her electricity turned off for non-payments, gas money, money for her child's medications, etc. Yet she always has money to smoke, drink alcohol, ordering food, buying stuff to decorate her house, etc. And always has excuses for why she just can't pay me back on time. And she even claims that she just forgot that the bills were due. She recently formed a new group of friends that don't have any children or any responsibilities, who can party with her, enable her bad habits, bring liquor to her house, buy her things, and get drunk every single weekend. And yet I was placed on the back burner because me having a family, a child, and responsibilities no longer fits into her lifestyle. Her husband is actively addicted to substances, and she enables him to stay active in addiction, would constantly call me literally crying and screaming into my ear about how badly he treats her, how strung out he is, and how badly they're fighting. But then in the same conversation, she reverts back to making excuses for him whenever solutions are presented. But any mention of my husband, who works hard to take care of his family and we're both in therapy, and she has nothing but unkind things to say about him, referencing back to many years prior when we were struggling in the past. She was unhappy when my husband and I got married, where she said that she didn't support it and that she didn't want to know about it. But the thing is, we are very happy and we have been for quite a while. It's almost as if she resents my husband and my family for making me less accessible to her instead of being happy for me. Well, fast forward to present day, and my husband and I are expecting our second child, which was all part of the plan, and she is also not happy about that. She even went as far as encouraging me to make sure the birth doesn't happen, if you know what I mean, and said that I was making a mistake. Now for reference, I'm struggling in this pregnancy with something that is causing extreme morning sickness all day, every day, and I'm throwing up 5 to 10 times a day, and I'm barely able to hold down water. And sure, there are medications that help, but the side effects are also just super rough. It is temporary and I know it will pass, but still it's really hard nonetheless. Well, my breaking point was reaching out to her for support recently because of the mental toll that it's all taking on me. Because she said to me, "You did this to yourself and you need to figure out how to deal with it on your own." And this was said a few days after I said no when she needed $250 for an ongoing health issue her dog has had for months now. You know, the same one that she's just completely let go. Well, after she said that, full stop, I blocked her number, all of her socials, and also deleted several of my socials because she had multiple friends watching my posts and reporting back to her. She even created profiles to try and get access to me, but I did not provide any explanation or any reason for cutting her off. I know from years and years of dealing with her that she will try to turn it back around on me, play the perpetual victim, twist it to make it my fault, and manufacture a list of things that she thinks I've done wrong, and I honestly just don't have the time or energy to deal with it. Wow, good for you for cutting this lady off because she is insane. She's the classic person who literally only takes away from friendships and doesn't give anything. She's always looking for a handout, but she's never able to give a handout herself. And that's honestly so obnoxious. And I really think the worst part about this is that you are completely right. She's pissed off because you're focusing on other people instead of her, as if your family and your children are somehow a distraction from what she wants. And it's like, my God, she was never your friend to begin with. Everything with her was just transactional because she literally only wanted money out of you and nothing else. So seriously, good for you for cutting her off because that lady sounds like an absolute nightmare to deal with. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. An entitled truck driver decided to be a jerk by flashing his lights and honking his horn anytime we tried to stop him on the highway. So me and my girlfriend decided to get some petty revenge by literally giving him a taste of his own medicine. Here's what happened. So this happened last summer when my girlfriend and I were driving back from her sister's house. It was a long drive, and since we left late at night, we ended up on the toll roads around 1 to 2 o'clock in the morning. Now at first, we noticed flashes of light in the distance and assumed it was heat lightning since, it was summer, so we just didn't think much of it. A little while later, we got behind a semi-truck on a 2-lane road. When we switched lanes to pass him, everything seemed fine until he moved behind us and started flashing his brights at us non-stop. Well, that's when we realized that the heat lightning we had been seeing was actually this guy flashing his brights at every car in front of him. On top of that, he started honking at us. Stunned, we switched lanes to let him pass, and as we did, he flicked us off. At that point, my girlfriend decided to stay behind him because she didn't want to drive next to him. Well, as we continued driving, he did the same thing to another car. After a few minutes, I then joked that we should give him a taste of his own medicine. My girlfriend said yeah, and she started flashing her lights at him, honking her horn, and then sped past him, and I even flicked him off. By the time he realized what was happening, we were already far ahead. He tried to catch up, but his truck just didn't have the speed, and we simply couldn't stop laughing. We never figured out why he was doing it, but blinding people at night like that was just dumb and dangerous. He wasn't trapped in traffic or anything. He was just being a massive jerk. So in the end, we got our petty revenge, and we had a good laugh all the way home. Yeah, I will never understand why some truck drivers act like that, where they will be up on your tail and flashing their lights and honking their horn as if they somehow own the road. It's like, dude, I'm going the speed limit and I'm literally out of your way. I'm trying to pass around you because you're the one going too slow. So for you to pretend to be super aggressive for some dumb reason, all because I'm trying to get around you, like that is honestly so obnoxious. So honestly, I don't blame you for getting revenge on this guy, because the way this guy treated you, in my opinion, was completely unacceptable. Today, I messed up by sending a badly timed gift to the work group chat that caused all of my coworkers and manager to start desperately messaging me that I need to delete it right away. Here's what happened. So this took place back in 2020 during the lockdowns, and I'm 30 years old at the time. My workplace shifted to remote working, so everyone was now working from home, and Microsoft Teams was the new tool that we were using to keep in contact. My manager suggested that in the mornings, everyone sends a GIF or a meme to the group chat when they start work. That way, everybody knows we're online. The group chat consisted of 15 people, so mornings were a little annoying as the group chat was flooded with images and messages. As a fan of The Simpsons, I would usually just send some random Simpsons GIF, like Homer emerging from the bushes or Ralph rolling down a hill. So one morning, I had to start a little earlier to catch up on some work, and I opened up Teams and I did my usual Simpsons-related search, and then I picked the GIF of evil Homer dressed as the devil, shaking maracas and dancing on the grave of good Homer. And honestly, I thought I was the first person to message in the group that morning, but I was completely wrong. After I sent the message, I went to the bathroom, and while on the toilet, I could hear my Teams notifications go off, and even heard somebody try to call me twice. But I figured it could wait until I got back to my desk. So I get to see what's going on a couple of minutes later. The group chat was still open with my GIF of evil Homer dancing on a grave, but there was another message I hadn't seen earlier. The message had the same timestamp as mine, but it appeared in the chat before my GIF. They must have sent it moments before I did, making it look like I had sent my GIF of the grave dancing Homer as a response. Well, the message was one of the team members saying that her dad died over the weekend, and she wouldn't be working for the next few days to spend time with the family and plan the funeral. When I realized what it looked like, my heart sank. I rushed to delete the message and just prayed that she hadn't seen it. The other notifications was one colleague sending me a screenshot of the chat and asking me what I was thinking, and the others were 2 missed calls from my manager and an all-caps message telling me to delete the GIF immediately. After deleting it, I called my manager to let her know what had happened, and thankfully she assumed it was a mistake and that I would never do something so insensitive. I asked if she thought I should say anything to the colleague, since I wasn't sure if she had actually seen it, but my manager said that she was offline now anyways, so all I could do was wait until she's back if I was going to say anything. When she returned to work, I did explain what happened and I gave her an apology. I didn't give the full description exactly of what GIF I sent, just that it wasn't appropriate for the time. Luckily, she said she had not seen the message, so thankfully I didn't hurt her, but I did scare the living daylights out of about 5 coworkers who had seen the message and the GIF before I was able to delete it. And honestly, with all things considered, I think I got incredibly lucky. Oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. First off, you're so lucky your coworker didn't see that because yeah, that could have been really bad. But also, at least you have people who care and they're like, wait a second, you need to delete that. Because I've worked in places where my coworkers could care less what I'm doing. And so you very easily could have had somebody in that group be like, oh, that's funny, let me report you and get you in trouble. So yeah, this was definitely a mess up, but honestly, it clearly was not on purpose. But it's just so unfortunate and kind of funny that that's the message you sent, especially after something so devastating that your coworker just described. Am I the jerk for not having my roommate's back on enforcing her boundaries about our roommate? Because right now she's incredibly mad at me and I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so I live with 3 roommates. We'll call them Leah, May, and Darcy. Leah and I have lived together for 3 years now, May for 1 year, and Darcy for only a few months. Well, the issues started with Darcy getting a new boyfriend who started coming over quite frequently. I have no issue with this and neither does May because the boyfriend is very nice. But apparently it's Leah that has the issue with this. Now, Leah's room is right next door to Darcy. Her complaints so far have been the following. For starters, she's been woken up to the sounds of bed squeaking a couple of times. Secondly, Darcy hasn't told us when he's coming over a couple of times. So he's walked in while Leah is in pajamas or doing Pilates. He also doesn't really clean up after himself at the bathroom. And also, he left the window blind open when it's always closed. But mostly, overall, it's how often he's over at the house. It's been a month of this boyfriend being around, and Leah has come ranting to me on multiple occasions. She has sat down with Darcy to discuss this, and Darcy was embarrassed by the noise thing, and I believe it hasn't happened ever since then. However, Leah also told Darcy that she could only have her boyfriend over once a week, as she said that she made it clear when Darcy moved in that this was a quiet house where boys can't come and go, not even overnight once a week, but anything longer than 15 minutes or just getting picked up. Ever since that talk, Darcy still has him over, even though it is a little bit less, going from maybe 4 times a week to 2 times a week, but still, it's way more often than Leah would want. Now, I've kind of just gone along with whatever Leah has said because it's easier and we are good friends, but I don't really care that much. And also, I live on a different floor from them in our house. Frankly, I have no issue with any of that, except for the obvious point of the bed squeaking, which I'm happy has been addressed. I also have sympathy because the boyfriend lives in dorms on an army base, so they have no option but to come to our place if they want to hang out without spending any money. Well, here's where I may be the jerk. Darcy texted our group chat asking if she could have her boyfriend over tonight. Leah was talking to me when we got the message, and I told her that it's up to her, but I'm not going to say no. She then started ranting about the situation again, and at this point I kind of snapped, and I said to her, your boundaries might not be reasonable, and I explained that a lot of people wouldn't care about him being over or some of the issues that she's had with him. Well, she was very clearly not impressed with what I said, and the conversation devolved from there into me telling her to do what she wanted to, but it's also up to her now. I'm not getting involved, with her replying and saying, well, that's fine. You haven't had my back since the beginning of this, so what difference does it make? So seriously, am I the jerk for what I said to her? Like, I can see where some frustration comes from, but I don't think we have any right to limit what someone is doing in the place they rent. Leah does have bad anxiety, so this might be a contributing factor. What should I do? Okay, honestly, I really can see both sides here because this does sound incredibly messy. For starters, Leah is literally right next to them. She has a front row seat at how noisy and obnoxious Darcy probably is being. And I don't know about you, but if you've had like roommates or even like lived in an apartment complex, noise is just gonna be a part of the equation. Like literally, this is just something that happens and you kind of just have to live with it. But when it comes to Leah, clearly this is something way worse than what would normally be allowed in an apartment. And she's kind of latched onto the idea of like, oh no, this is Darcy's boyfriend and he's gotta go. So on that end, I can understand where she's coming from, but also I think Darcy absolutely has a right to bring her boyfriend over. For me, unless it's in writing in some kind of like lease of some kind that says no, we can't have anybody over here ever, then sorry about that, but my significant other is absolutely coming over. Like, you can't stop me, I didn't sign up for that and I don't care. And it's also really weird to me that Leah's trying to drag you into this and being like, you need to help support me on this. It's like, nope, I don't think so. I'm not involved. I live upstairs and I don't have anything to do with this. Do whatever you want. I've had friends like that where it's like their way or the highway, and I can completely understand why you're like, okay, I'm not getting involved in this. So that's just my take on it. I kind of see both sides of this and I can see why you would be annoyed, but I can also absolutely understand why Leah is like, okay, this has gotta stop. But either way, hopefully this gets worked out because this sounds like an annoying situation. Today, I found out that my girlfriend of almost 5 years cheated on me in a way that honestly has broken my trust. And at this point, I don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So we've been together for 4 years, almost 5 in total. And today, the guy she went out with told me everything that happened between them. Basically, they met at the gym and started texting each other on Instagram. One day, they decided to go out together, obviously without telling me, and from there were other dates between the two of them and other group dates with his friends. And for reference, she only told me that she had met this group of nice guys and that she had gone out with them a couple of times. During one of those dates that she went with just the two of them, she invited the guy to her grandmother's house since the bars were closed and it was cold outside. When they arrived, he lay down on the couch to sleep and she leaned against his chest, taking his arms and holding him close to her to be hugged. After that night, he told me that on other occasions she also tried to kiss him. For example, while they were walking, she stopped, put her hands on his shoulders and stared at him. As soon as I found out everything, I confronted her, and as I told her what had been said to me, she continued to deny it, saying that for her, he was just a friend and that she loved him because he was going through a difficult family situation. I then had to tell her everything that he had told me to get her to admit something, even if she continued to contradict herself. Looking at the chat between her and him, I saw that it was almost always her who suggested they go out, and that they would go out at night, which would literally be on nights when I sent her a message saying goodnight, and she would just brush me off and ignore it. We finally got to the point where she burst into tears, apologizing and saying that she doesn't feel anything for that guy, and that he was always just a friend to her. Now, to give some info about me, I'm a very quiet guy and I'm introverted. I prefer to stay home on Saturday nights, or at most, always go out with the same group of friends. But she's the opposite. She likes going out, she's extroverted, and she wants to go out every single Saturday. So honestly, I don't know if I should forgive her. It bothers me to end a relationship like this after 5 years together, but I have no idea how to forget or even ignore what happened, especially because she hid it from me. What should I do? Okay, I think it's important to know that I don't think she's actually sorry. She's only sorry that she got caught and not that she was cheating. If she had any ounce of remorse about what she was doing, she would have disconnected from this guy and been like, wait a second, what am I doing? This is so wrong. But instead, she was sneaking behind your back and going out with this guy and also meeting his friends and doing all this other sketchy stuff. And that, in my opinion, is not the mark of a good girlfriend. If anything, that's the mark of someone who absolutely does not have your best interest in mind. And she clearly just doesn't care about you in that way. So truly, do of this what you will, but I know for me, there's no way I would ever take someone like that back, because that's a level of betrayal that I just honestly don't think I would ever be able to forgive. Am I the jerk for snapping at my friend after she humiliated me in front of others? Because things seriously got very heated, and at this point, I don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so I've been close friends with this girl for the past 2 years. We've had our fair share of issues, but this time things escalated to the extreme. Recently, we attended an event with some mutual friends. While walking around, she jokingly called me pig crap in front of everybody. And while I did take this in stride, it still did sting a little. Later, when everyone was taking pictures, I asked if we could take one together, but she insisted on a group picture instead. Our friends encouraged us to take one first, saying that we do the group photo afterwards. But suddenly, she withdrew and lashed out. She then said to me, "Then go ahead, take the picture alone." And it honestly felt humiliating. Now, this wasn't the first time. Something similar happened before when we had an argument. She had refused to take a group picture just because I was in it. She then made a scene and then walked away. Confused and upset, I asked her what in the world that was about, but she ignored me. I persisted and raised my voice a bit, and I demanded an answer, at which point she ran away. And you know what? I left the event too. Later on, she called me, yelling about how I insulted her in public. She said she didn't take the picture because she wasn't comfortable with me. And it's like, excuse me, what are you talking about? The argument got heated and she shouted at me and I yelled back at her. And then out of nowhere, she threw in and said, "Is this how you talk to your mother and sister?" At that point, I lost it. I said, "F you," and then I hung up. I also texted her saying that she is an awful person and I was done walking on eggshells around her. I pointed out how she treats strangers with sweetness, but is awful to people who actually care about her. And then I blocked her completely. She then called me from another number, absolutely furious. "How dare you cuss at me? How dare you call me awful?" But I retaliated, saying that she was the one who dragged my mother into the argument. Well, her response was to say, "Should I call your mother and tell her that she's awful and say the F word at her?" She then accused me of not knowing how to respect women. She then threatened to file a police complaint against me for cussing at her. And then she ended the call by saying, "I hope you go straight to Hades." But I just said, "Yeah, I'll see you there," and then I hung up. After cooling down, I felt bad for how ugly things got. I sent her a message saying I didn't appreciate her bringing my mother into it, but I was sorry for cussing at her and how the fight escalated. Well, she just read it and then she blocked me. So honestly, am I the jerk in this situation for the way I responded? Because right now, I seriously don't know what to do. Okay, this is such a weird situation because my God, no, I don't think you're the jerk at all. I think you probably could have had that conversation in a much more mature manner, but seriously, your friend here is not a good friend at all. She literally puts you down in public, she calls you names and treats you like garbage in front of everybody else, and she goes as far as trying to isolate you from the group just to humiliate you. So yeah, this whole situation really sucks, but I think you really need to find better friends, because this lady definitely definitely does not sound like one. My entitled older sister refuses to take her kids back after me and my great-grandmother babysit them for several days. And even when I bring them right to her house, she threatens to call the police on me just to get me to try and keep her kids for a few more days. But I wasn't having it, and I refused to back down. Here's what happened. So basically, my sister called my mom the other day and tried to convince my mom to pick up the kids and bring them to my house for my great-grandmother to watch, without okaying it with my great-grandmother first. My mom obviously refused because she had work, and I had the car my great-grandmother and I share, since I use the car during the week for work. So on Saturday, my great-grandmother went to pick up the kids as usual so they could spend the night with us and go to church the next day. After church, Nana will keep the kids for a few more hours before taking them home. However, when she took the kids home, Candy blatantly refused to take them and made many excuses as to why she couldn't and wouldn't take them. Candy, by the way, is the name of my older sister, and that is not her real name. So I had just woken up from a nap because I'm sick, and I was confused to see my great-grandmother coming back inside with the kids with her. Now, to clarify, it's spring break for the kids, so naturally, my sister didn't want to deal with them. My great-grandmother was really upset because she has things that she has to do during the week that she can't take the kids to, and she was so angry she was almost in tears. So I decided to take it upon myself to let the kids chill for a bit and play, while I had a cup of hot tea to soothe my throat and get myself something to eat before I loaded them back up in the car and drove them home. The two older kids were really upset with their mom because they were excited to see her, and she basically just straight up rejected them, especially my oldest nephew. He got really upset when we were loading him back up in the car. Luckily, we managed to keep him calm with some YouTube videos, and my Nana went back inside so I could take the kids home. When I got to my sister's house, she opened the door and got incredibly upset when I told her I brought the kids home. I calmly explained that I am sick and our heat went out, which it actually did. My great-grandmother is relying on a tiny space heater at the moment, and I'm using a heated blanket. This is the third time our heat has gone out, so our house is pretty cold. My sister told me that she was not taking the kids and demanded that I take them back to my house. She was telling me about all the stuff that she had to do during the week and that she had talked to Nana about keeping the kids for this week, but that was a blatant lie. I kept my voice low and I tried not to argue with her. Also, I wouldn't scare the kids, as they were still in the car, but the driver's side door was open. My sister told me I was scaring the kids. Meanwhile, I was talking low and non-aggressively, and she was standing on the doorstep and was leaned over yelling in my face. I just calmly told her, Candy, either you take your kids or I call the cops and report you for abandonment. These are your only two options. Taking them back to my house is not an option. Basically, I was gentle parenting my older sister. She then threatened to call the cops on me, claiming that I forcibly took them out of my great-grandmother's care just to bring them back to her. And that's when things escalated to a point that I honestly never expected. As a matter of fact, I did not take them out of my great-grandmother's care. Nana happily agreed to let me take the kids home because her back and leg was really bothering her, and she was exhausted. I told her the cops would not take her seriously if she called them for that, but I was more than ready to handle it if it came to that. Then she started the shaking and fake crying, with no tears of course, telling me that she's too overwhelmed. She's dealing with DHS, and she has a mediation hearing to find out if she keeps the kids or not. I simply told her that wasn't my problem, and I gave her the only two options that I had. Oh, and she also accused me of calling DHS on her the moment she opened the door and saw me standing there. I had no idea that DHS was called on her again, and I told her that. She actually seemed to believe me for once and placed the blame on my ex-brother-in-law. She then told me to give her a minute and went inside and closed the door. So I just went back to the car and I sat in the driver's seat to wait for her. The two older kids were freaked out, and the baby was calling out for his mother. After 10 minutes, she came outside and was on the phone, then went back inside for 5 more minutes. I honestly thought she was calling the cops on me. My niece was scared, and I was thinking that I'd have to call the cops on her, because what kind of mother refuses to take her own children, especially when she knows that the house she wanted her kids to stay in for a week no longer has any heat? Like, what is she thinking? Eventually, she came back out and started to unbuckle the kids. The oldest nephew refused to get out of the car for his mom, so I had to pick him up and take him out of the car and draped his coat over him. My older sister literally tried to physically intimidate me by standing over me and yelling in my face. Then she threatened to call the cops on me, and then she started fake crying and trying to guilt trip me again before she realized that I was not giving in. Now, I hate confrontation, so I was having a silent panic attack with my heart pounding and my hands shaking, but I refused to play into her act and I just kept calm, specifically because I didn't want to scare the kids. I had to soothe and comfort the older two children while we were waiting on their mom when she went back into the house because my niece was about to cry, thinking I was going to jail. Candy's entitlement just baffles me, and the fact that she tried to lie to my face, saying that she and Nana had talked all weekend about her keeping the kids, is absolutely ridiculous. She just didn't want to keep her kids over spring break. Luckily, Nana and I have improved our relationship, and she wasn't upset with me at all for taking the kids home. She's old, she's tired, and in a lot of pain now, so she really did not have any energy to take care of the kids. I did end up calling my ex-brother-in-law when I was driving home and explain the situation to him so he could tell his lawyer and get it put on the file he has against my sister. My sister also refused to let me see what the inside of her house looked like, and she is missing the entire top row of her teeth. She looks nearly 50 years old at the ripe age of 25. I will probably make a DHS report to explain everything that happened this evening, and if she does try to accuse me of doing that, I'll own up to it. There was also an unfamiliar car parked in front of her house, and there was somebody inside the house. Her boyfriend doesn't have a car because his license got revoked due to several DUIs, and the last one resulted in him losing his car because he totaled it while under the influence. Honestly, I feel so bad for the kids, and I really hope I never have to deal with that kind of situation ever again. What an awful situation indeed. Like, your sister sounds like an absolute train wreck, and I can completely understand why the ex-brother-in-law is probably fighting for full custody, because this lady sounds like an awful mother. Like, think about it. She's not even wanting her kids back during spring break. She basically said, "No, I don't want them. You can keep them." Like, what are you thinking? That's crazy to me. Not to mention the fact that she was obviously upsetting her kids, like physically upsetting them. They even refused to get out of the car because they were so angry with her. And if I was a kid in that situation, I'd be upset too. So just from what you told us, it really does sound like your sister does not have it all together, and hopefully for the sake of those kids, they're able to get into a home that actually will take care of them. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked down below in the description. My previous job at a hotel was an absolute nightmare, and after being mistreated for 11 days, I decided to quit straight up. Here's what happened. So I wanted to detail some of my jobs I've had previously that led up to the one job I'm going to talk about today. For starters, I used to work at a haunted hotel. I left that and I went to work at a Worst Eastern. I ended up losing that gig for literally no reason, which is no big deal. If there's one thing I learned from 20 years in radio, people get fired, and they get fired for stupid reasons. It's just life. So I got a job at a new hotel about a week after losing the other one. I walked into a job interview and I got it on the spot. They were even promising me that I could move up to management before I even started. I thought to myself, this is it. This is where I'm going to finally find my spot. I'm going to run this joint and everything is going to be completely fine. Now, there's this thing that tends to happen to me whenever something seems too good or too perfect for me. And that's where I think to myself, well, it isn't at all. To start with, everyone in the hotel community that I knew told me this place was an absolute trap. They had been robbed multiple times, all while I was working at other hotels on that same street. And while the hotel did change its name and start over, nothing got better. Some highlights included the guy training me on my first day. For one, I actually knew more about the reservation software and the system than he did. I actually knew more about it than my boss, who literally never came to work unless she was forced to do so against her will. Now, thanks to using the software myself for 4 years, plus being good friends with one of the people who provides tech support to the company, and my boyfriend worked on this software for 10 years at least, so needless to say, I was in a good spot. If there was a trick to something when my boyfriend and I worked together, he would show me how to do it. So I was light years ahead of the guy who was trying to train me. Now, my problem with him is on my first day, while we're standing there during a lull in the day, instead of telling me about the hotel, he starts telling me about the owners and how awful they are. The other male coworker that I had when I worked my first night shift also made me incredibly uncomfortable, in the sense that he was telling me that if he was my boyfriend, which honestly you would never be that lucky, he said he wouldn't allow me to work at night, that a woman's place is at home, especially at night. Keep in mind, this absolute jewel of a human being was also young enough to be my child. Literally, I could have had this kid at 20 years old, and he's standing there telling me where my place was, and that he clearly thought ill of my boyfriend for even allowing me to work at night. Oh, and by the way, this is literally the first time I met him. Now, most of the time we worked alone after training was over, unless you worked in the mornings. Then you had a housekeeping staff there, but for the most part, they steered clear of me and wouldn't talk to me. I've dealt with this at hotels before. The majority of housekeeping are Mexican Americans, and they've been treated like absolute garbage by snobby white kids at the front desk, who who make all kinds of assumptions about if the housekeepers are legal or even speak English. Like, it's brutal to see up close, and I shut that garbage down when I see it. But I never had the opportunity to get friendly with our housekeepers. And apparently, I did not want to, because the same day I was told by my disembodied voice of a boss on the phone that I had to start putting my purse in the lunchroom or on top of the housekeeping lockers instead of leaving it on the floor behind the desk out of the way, I got robbed. I hate telling people this part, but it's true. I had a pair of sunglasses go missing and $40 disappear out of my wallet. Before you say, well, why didn't you watch the cameras? Let me reassure you, there weren't any cameras on the property. Not at all. Not anywhere. Not even watching the desk where I was counting cash twice a shift. Another fun feature of my job duties at this hotel was if I worked a night shift, I was literally the only person on property after 9 p.m. At 10:30 p.m., we were supposed to collect the barbecue tools from the barbecue area and bring them inside. But I thought to myself, why though? Who on earth is going to steal a spatula? Well, apparently the guy who jumped out of the bushes at me one night while I was doing this. I still have no idea if it was a guest or a homeless person, but I think he was pretty surprised to find out that I have no problem hitting someone with a spatula and the barbecue tongs. We had another homeless guy break into our pool using a plastic hanger to lift the latch because we didn't chain the gate at this madhouse. I said screw it and let him keep swimming in his underwear because I was not going out there to fight some weirdo with a plastic hanger. Also, as a side note, this was only 11 days into my job, but even still there was more that went on. The owners of this place had a dog that they would bring into the hotel. It wasn't a pet-friendly hotel, but of course, the owner's dog isn't a pet. The dog would hang out with us at the desk while the owner did whatever they pretended to do, including never wondering where the general manager was, because she was never there. One day, I saw the owners go out to their car, and they left the dog with us, so I assumed that they would be right back. Logic has no place in that building, though, and I get a call 3 hours later from the owners, who have in fact left in their car to go to Oregon. They had just forgotten their dog in the office and wondered if I could take it home for the weekend. So I thought to myself, no, this is not happening. Thankfully, another coworker who came in said to me, oh, this happens all the time, I'll take him home. And I'm thinking to myself, what is going on? A day later, the only semi-sane person I worked with comes running in from the parking garage and says to me, so someone is unalive in the parking lot. It's a Saturday morning. I just call the cops. We walk outside to this car that was parked in our parking garage in 100-degree weather with the windows up and the trunk open. My coworker recognizes the car when we get closer and said she had kicked him out a couple of days before. When the cops arrived, they didn't actually confirm that this guy was unalived or not, but they did tell us that the trunk that was wide open was full of stolen license plates from all over the country. And after that, I just went back inside to the desk and pretend this wasn't a David Lynch movie. So I was there 11 days and this all happened in the first week. During my second week, we got a guest who had MS and was fleeing an awful relationship. All of her belongings were in her car and looking at the reservation for her. The front desk had this woman moving every single night for 2 weeks to another room and she could barely walk. Garbage like this isn't easy to fix if you actually pay attention. I rolled up my sleeves and moved a bunch of one-night stays to other rooms to keep her in this same room for her entire stay. I got in trouble for that, but it's pretty standard hotel practice though, especially because it's easier for housekeepers too. They don't have to do a full checkout clean on an extra room every day. They can just do stayover service for the person, refreshing their towels, taking out the trash, etc. It just makes sense to keep a long-term or longer-term guest in the same room, especially a disabled guest who really needed a room on the ground floor. I also got chewed out for helping this woman with her luggage. Now, I worked for a company that is an international hotel group previously, as well as the Worst Eastern, and helping older or disabled people with their things is standard practice. This woman had a massive Mac Pro that she needed for work, but couldn't lift it onto the desk in her room, so I did it for her. I climbed around and plugged everything in, and she was delighted. I was told I was wasting my time though on unimportant guests, and I was apparently trying to provide 5-star service in a 2-star hotel. I was so upset, but I stuck it out for a few more days. This one woman would come in every morning to get the breakfast and have her water bottle refilled, and I would put up the "Be Right Back" sign and carry her food back to her room. I did not care about getting in trouble for it, because I'm pretty sure you could have sacrificed a goat in that place and not gotten fired. And then, with all things considered and all the things I had seen already, one day I just kind of snapped. I was tired of getting jumped all over, as well as being treated horribly, with zero support from management, because the manager never came to work. work. She sat home on her computer all the time with her online girlfriend, who I heard wasn't even real. But Lord, I don't care about that. That morning, the fire alarm, which didn't actually even call the fire department since they had forgotten to pay the bill, suddenly went off every 5 minutes. And no matter how many times I reset it, it just kept screaming. I was tired of working in a place that didn't care about their guests or their employee safety and literally made 0 sense, and being asked to babysit the dog, as well as getting yelled at for doing my job better than anyone else. With all that combined, I just quit. Of course, everyone tried to talk me out of it, but I was like, nope, I can't stay here another moment. And so my boyfriend picked me up from work and we just left. When we came back to get my last paycheck and to sign the paper that told them why I quit, there was a guy who was just covered in tattoos, even all over his face, asleep on the lobby couch. I went to the table to sign things, and the table was so wobbly that it actually fell off one leg. I handed the paperwork back to them and was handed a handwritten personal check for my wages there. And then after my coworker said, "Oh, by the way, that lady you were taking care of, she passed away that afternoon before you quit. You were probably the last person to see her alive. We didn't notice for at least a day." After hearing that absolutely devastated me, because the last thing I did before walking out the door, other than handing in an epic resignation letter detailing all of this nonsense, was take that woman her breakfast. She didn't come down to the lobby, so I called her room before we cleaned up breakfast and asked her if she wanted her usual, and she said she was hungry but couldn't walk down. I asked her if it was okay for me to use the master key to come into her room and bring her food, and she said yes. I loaded up the plate, took it to her room, took her water bottle back to the office to fill it up for her, and took it back to her, and she thanked me. And I locked her room for her, and I went back up front when the fire alarm was going off. It was all so much to handle, and this all happened in 11 days. So with all things considered, this is why I no longer work in the hotel industry. That sounds like an absolute nightmare of a job. Like quite literally, everything that could have gone wrong pretty much did. You were almost robbed multiple times. You even were robbed, like straight up had money stolen out of your purse, most likely from one of your sketchy front desk coworkers. And it sounds like the guys there were just completely ridiculous, saying terrible things and making these weird insinuations. For the sake of this story and explaining it, I did leave a few things out that were pretty sketchy overall, but trust me when I say this, those guys were not right in the head. So good for you for quitting this job. You knew pretty quickly that this was not for you, and these people probably really did suck at their job. And by no means are you obligated to try and work with those people in the slightest, because in my opinion, it sounds like they did not care about this place in the slightest, and you were going above and beyond to try and make this work. So hopefully for the safety of anybody that goes in that previous hotel you worked at, it hopefully will get closed down, because the management and the owner truly do not care. Multiple women that I've gone on dates with have said that I am full of red flags, and I don't know what that means, and I seriously don't know what to do with that information. So I got separated last summer after 8 years, with 5 years of dating and 3 years of being married. Nothing like cheating or domestic problems or financial problems, just minor annoyances and personality differences that accumulated over the years that got exacerbated by the pandemic. I moved out on my own in December. We have a 2.5-year-old daughter together, and she spends weekdays with me and weekends with her mom. My baby's mom was my first real girlfriend, and I only had some hookups and short-term flings before dating her. After moving out, I decided to try online dating for the first time, and I used Tinder to do that, as that was the one I heard the most about. I had a surprisingly good run. I hooked up with over 10 girls, and surprisingly, because I heard my friends complain about it all the time, I would drop off my daughter at daycare on Friday mornings for her mom to pick up in the afternoon, and either go on dates to see someone I already knew over the weekend, usually meeting with 2 to 3 women over the weekend. One thing that I did notice is that anyone who is a bit older or has been in a long-term relationship before, so like 6 or 7 of these women, mentions that I am full of red flags or I just seem sketchy. I have never followed up to ask exactly what they mean by that, since I didn't want any more self-hatred or self-doubt than I already have. Honestly, the separation has been a struggle, but the woman I spent some quality time with on Saturday night mentioned the same thing, and now I can't get it out of my head. I have a well-paying career, I'm passionate about it, I treat my daughter like a princess, and I have my own place downtown in a major city, and I own a car. I treat my dates to the best of my abilities as well, with all the bells and whistles, such as researching where to go in advance, dressing well, paying for everything, holding the door open and hanging up their coat for them, as well as cleaning up after them and everything. So my question would be, what could they possibly mean by saying that I'm full of red flags when they all still seem to want me? I want to know, because eventually I want to settle down again and have a family again, and I want to start working on fixing whatever it it is that would make me undesirable or dangerous in their eyes for my future partner? What should I do? This is a tough one because it really does seem like from the outside looking in, you're doing everything right. But for them to say, oh, there's a lot of red flags and then not give any kind of explanation really sucks. Like, how on earth are you supposed to have any kind of accurate assumption about what it is that you're doing that's freaking people out if nobody can be honest with you and just be like, hey, it's this, and this? So on that end, I probably would not rely on these dates to try and get an accurate description of who you are as a person, but maybe go to somebody close who can give you an honest opinion. Maybe like a friend or a family member who's going to be honest and not just try to gas you up, because right now it seems like you're just left scratching your head, thinking to yourself, wait, what am I doing wrong? And I can completely understand where you're coming from there. So hopefully you're able to find somebody that can kind of give you some more direction in life, because as of right now, just being told multiple times that you have red flags all over the place without knowing what those red flags are in the first place is in and of itself incredibly frustrating. An entitled man-child freaks out on me as well as my interns, claiming that because I'm a woman, I can't possibly be the supervisor over this department. But I simply wasn't taking that sitting down, as I put this entitled man-child in his place and kicked him out of my office altogether. Here's what happened. So about 5 years ago, I worked at the International Center of a university in the United States. To give some background information, I am an Asian female, I'm 5'1" in height, and though I was in my early 30s at the time, I did still look quite young and was often mistaken for being in my early 20s or late teens. My main job responsibility at the time was the recruitment, training, and management of about a dozen international student interns who worked the front desk. Anyways, we had been swamped that morning, so I hadn't had time to go out to eat lunch. I got a sandwich at our campus vending machine and sat down in the break room. The break room was always cold due to the AC blasting through the room, so I put on a comfy university jacket. I kept it at my desk just to wear during break. I kept the break room door open to keep an ear out on the front and let my interns know that they could still pop in to ask any questions that they want. I had hired a couple of new students that month, and they were still learning. A few minutes later, I heard a man's voice yell something along the lines of, "No, you do not understand. You are stupid. The childish outcries exclaimed in a grown man voice made me immediately stand up and rush to the front desk area without even remembering to take my jacket off. The man was literally wagging his finger at my intern and yelling while almost comically stomping his feet. I interjected his tantrum and introduced myself as the intern's supervisor. I gave my name and position, and I told him I could assist him with the issue. The man immediately looked me up and down, scoffed a short no, and then he turned right back to the intern and asked her to call the supervisor, as he needed to ask someone who actually works here, not just some young girl like the intern who sits there at the front repeating nonsense. It wasn't my first rodeo with unnecessarily angry students, so I calmly gestured at my intern to step away, and I planted myself directly in front of him. That made him change his rant towards me, saying, "Listen, I know you Chinese want to help each other, but my issue is urgent, so I need to talk to your supervisor. Call your supervisor and he can sign the form I need signed." Yes, both my intern and I were Asian, but neither of us were Chinese. I hate when people over-enunciate when speaking to me. My thoughts often immediately go to the fact that English is my first language, as evident by the fact that I just spoke to you. Also, it really upsets me that he assumed the supervisor would be male. I did my best to remain calm, however, and I confirmed the issue. Oh, so you're looking for a travel signature? If you go online and submit the form, you can get that taken care of. But this guy starts screaming, "No, you don't understand, idiot." He then proceeds to go on a rapid rant, saying that I must get a real staff member who actually works here, instead of giving him the same instructions again, because he needed his signed right now, because he wanted to go out of town tonight, and surely the school didn't want to make him, a student who pays such high tuition, to have to come back on campus just to get a signature before he leaves the country after his road trip. He then asked me how much money he gives to the school. He then went on a really racist rant about me and basically my coworkers, and at that point I had had enough. I raised my hand and put my palm out in front of his face for a second to stop his ongoing rant. I looked at him and I said, "Again, I am the supervisor in this area, and I hear your issue. My intern here has given you the instructions for this form that you need signed, but you want expedited service simply because you do not want to come back to our office on another day to pick it up. Is that correct? Okay, then no, let me continue. Unfortunately, that cannot be arranged, so please go home and submit the form online, and you can wait 2 to 3 business days for a response." He started to speak again, but I put my hand out again immediately, maintaining eye contact, and picked up the phone. "Also, sir, if you do not leave immediately, I will be calling campus security to escort you you out of this building for bothering me and my staff members. But before you go, just so you know, I will be noting in your form that you are missing a certain number of days from school. Know that you must maintain your full-time student status for your visa, as you have kindly told us of your planned weeks of absence. So please be ready to submit documentation of why this was an excused absence from your classes. Lastly, do not insult my staff again, or you will be banned from entering this office ever again. He stood there stunned for a few seconds, then started to say something again, but I then proceeded to dial the number on the phone. And that is when he ran out of the building. This may not have been the best solution ever to a yucky situation, but this was the first time I kicked a student out of the office, so I was a bit shaken up about it. The best part of the story, though, is what happened next. My boss at the time walked in a few minutes afterwards and asked me to come talk to her. I thought I was in trouble for some reason, but she actually asked me instead if everything was okay, because she met a rude international student outside. Apparently, the rude man had run into my boss outside, and he had asked her if she happens to know who is the boss of the girl in there, and if she knew how he could talk to him. My boss said that she was the supervisor of the woman who works in there, and asked if she could help. The man apparently then said something along the lines of how she then needed to find him the man highest up the chain because his issue demanded real work. He was rude enough that my boss actually did call the campus police to escort him out of the campus property. She told me that next time, the moment he raises his voice, I do not need to even engage him in conversation, but can just kick him out immediately, as he was forewarned that this is what will happen next time. So overall, that situation was ridiculous, and his attitude, demeanor, and the way he was talking to me and my interns really was incredibly upsetting. Wow, that guy was seriously a jerk. He hit like all the marks of being just an absolute jerk. He said some awful sexist and racist things, and he also went off on this tangent also he could try and get some kind of leeway on a trip that he clearly did not get approved through his school visa. So good for you for standing your ground and telling this guy to take a hike, because honestly, no one deserves to get treated like that in the slightest. And this guy absolutely had it coming. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My friends don't want me dating in the slightest, and I feel like they're being very controlling and overly aggressive towards me, and I don't know what to do. So for context, I am single for the first time since I was 19 years old and a sophomore in college. I dated a man for 6 years until October 2021, when I finally broke it off because the relationship turned severely toxic due to his addiction issues. He is now sober and we are still good friends, and I'm honestly proud of him. Now, even a week later, I spent some quality time with someone I knew in middle school and high school, and we spent our time together, and 3 months later, we are now in a relationship. He was a bare minimum boyfriend, and even though he was nice and kind, he didn't really treat me the way that you should. All my friends encouraged this relationship and said it would be good for me. But in November 2022, he broke up with me, and although it was for the best, I obviously was heartbroken. It's been 3.5 months since that incident, and I am thriving. I've lost 23 pounds, I've dyed my hair, and I'm doing great at work and my social life, and I'm finally saving money. Now here's where the issue comes in. My friends aggressively don't want me to entertain the thought of anything potentially romantic or anything else with another guy. They are constantly telling me I need time to be alone for a year or more, that I must be single, and I need to learn to be alone and love myself first and foremost out of a relationship. And these are all women in their mid to late 20s. None of my guy friends have echoed this sentiment in the slightest. This is all fine and dandy to me. I don't want a relationship, and honestly, it would take a lot for anyone to get me to even consider committing to them again. I just have a lot of stuff to work through from my childhood and from toxic relationships. The issue comes in though, for me, that it feels almost controlling and overly aggressive from some of my friends. For example, I downloaded some dating apps because I was bored, and when someone messaged me something wildly gross and inappropriate, I immediately would screenshot it and send it to my group chat and laugh about it. Now, most of my friends laughed, but my one friend immediately lectured me for even opening a dating app and told me that I shouldn't even have them on my phone, and I need to delete my profile. Now, mind you, I don't actually go on them, nor am I actively trying to meet someone. Sometimes I'm just bored. I don't know how to explain it. When my friends found out that I had a one-night stand, half of them were excited for me, and the other half were disappointed. I was asked out on a date recently, and most of my friends told me that I need to say no and that I shouldn't be going on any dates whatsoever. They again reiterated that I need to be alone and I need to be single for a year or more. Now, I do want to be single, but I don't see an issue going on a date with someone, especially an old friend I reconnected with, and I know is a good good person. If I went on a date with anyone right now, I would be very upfront that I do not want anything serious. But if something slowly naturally progresses, I don't want to stop it. I understand where they are coming from, but it has now gotten to the point that I don't even want to tell them what is going on in my life. And God forbid I actually develop a crush on someone. I just know that they would not be happy with me and they would be very disappointed in me. I now feel like I'm making choices based on not upsetting my friends versus what is best for me. What should I do? This is definitely a tricky situation because instinctively it really seems like you should do whatever you want and you really should be able to date whoever you want. But in that same vein of thought, it really seems like your friends are kind of worn out of you having bad relationships. Like maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like you share everything with your friends, even the disgusting things that people send you on Tinder. And I bet more than anything else, they're probably just tired of you getting your heart broken and then having to be the people to help you pick up the pieces. So them telling you to be single is probably less of them trying to be controlling or overly aggressive, but more so trying to protect you as well as trying to protect their own sanity. I mean, it really does sound like the original poster is cycling through relationships that are slowly destroying them. And maybe your friends are just tired of hearing about all this stuff that's going on that really seems to be self-inflicted issues. So maybe there's some truth to what your friends are saying. Maybe waiting a little bit before things go south would do you a lot of good. Because from the sounds of it, I really do think your friends are tired of what's going on. And they not only want the best for you, but also they want the best for themselves. My entitled manager tries to get rid of me by Friday, but then asks for me to work more on Saturday. But I decide to maliciously comply, leaving her out to dry as I say, nope, my last day's Friday. And years later, I now see how satisfying that decision truly was. Here's what happened. So for a little bit of background, I work in the film and TV industry. At the time of this story, I was working an entry-level position called the production assistant, or PA for short, and this was all on a failing TV show. My duties included office upkeep, stocking the kitchen, research for coworkers, various paperwork, picking up supplies from vendors, and picking up lunch for everyone in the department, among a list of other tasks. Now, I really liked my immediate boss, who we will call Coordinator 1. The two of us had a system to keep the office running, and we were starting to become really good friends. The problem, though, involved our department head, who was incredibly discriminatory based on people's skin color as well as their gender. And this was all at the height of the Me Too movement as well. After calling us darling one too many times, as well as winking at us, sneaking his girlfriend into the office, and flipping through Tinder on company time, Coordinator 1 reported him to the higher-ups. But in typical Hollywood fashion, they gave him a gentle slap on the wrist and sent him back to the department. So Coordinator 1 left the show in disgust. So once Coordinator 1 left, Coordinator number 2 stepped in. Now, I knew number 2, and I knew that I wouldn't get along immediately. She had been fired from her previous TV show for attitude problems. On her first day, she chewed me out for, and I kid you not, hanging the actor photos 11 inches too low on the wall. And it only got worse from there. This woman sucked up to the creepy department head, found faults with everyone around her, and loved power trips. She quickly made herself a nuisance to everyone in the department. But the creepy department head was too busy with Tinder to do anything. Between her constant berating, treating me like I was stupid, and unprofessional rudeness, she made my life a living nightmare. The final straw came when she screamed at me in front of the entire department for a small mistake. I almost packed my bag and walked out right then and there. And you know what? In hindsight, I really should have. But she told me I'd be replaced at the end of the month, so I thought I'd hang in there and collect a paycheck while I could. From then on, I counted down the days and made no attempt to hide my misery. The thing is, the TV show had barely started filming, and we were already severely behind schedule. The poor construction department was building sets 24/7, and the first episode was supposed to air in the next few weeks. For everyone in our department, this meant extremely long hours and working 6 days a week, which is not my problem. I was leaving soon anyways. In fact, Coordinator number 2 reminded me of that last week. They said to me, "Friday is your last day." It ended up being a nightmare of a week, more long hours and running behind schedule. The department would need to work another Saturday. Well, Friday came along, and I gleefully counted down the hours. At the end of the day, Coordinator number 2 realized her mistake. She hustled over to me on my way out the door, mind you, and said to me, "Can you work on Saturday as well?" And this is when my malicious compliance came into play. I said to her, "Nope, you said Friday's my last day." And that's when she got all huffy. She said to me, "I'm just trying to get you some extra money." Now, giving up one day of my measly PA paycheck was well worth the look on her face when I said, "No thanks. Friday's my last day. Bye now. And after I said that, I walked out to happily never see her again. I took a job on a much better TV show a few weeks later with the nicest crew ever. To this day, I've worked on lots of other shows, and I always warn my coworkers to not ever work with her. It turns out she has a bad reputation around town, even without my help. And what was the fallout after I left? Now that there was no PA working Saturday, coordinator number 2 had no choice but to do both her job and mine. Years later, and I'm now a coordinator, and I can tell you it's a job that keeps you busy. There's no way I'd be able to get anything done without the help of my amazing PAs. So it gives me extreme satisfaction to know that she had to get off her high horse, halt her very important emails as she put it, and go get everyone lunch and snacks, all the way up until my replacement was found. And that idea in and of itself was so worth quitting that job. Good for the original poster. That coordinator number 2 sounds like an absolute nightmare, and they seriously sound like a jerk across the board. And you can tell someone's an awful manager when they go on power trips like that and treat people lower than them like absolute garbage. Like, that is pretty clear evidence that you're not a good person and you are going to be such a nuisance and an awful thing to deal with on a daily basis. Like, these film sets sometimes go for 12 hours at a time. It is nothing to shake at. Like, it really is long hours. So to have to deal with someone like that all day, every day, would seriously be obnoxious and not worth the time. So if I was in the shoes of the original poster, I would do the exact same thing. I would be like, nope, Friday's my last day, I'm out of here. Because it's honestly just not worth it. And if anything, you being let go by Friday only reflected poorly on coordinator number 2. So in a roundabout way, the original poster aided in this person's downfall in the end. My boyfriend jokingly said he wanted to break up with me after he said that I was lying and that I was actually going behind his back to see someone else. And after it all got revealed that he was coordinating with my sister to pull this prank on me, I'm left feeling so unbelievably hurt and disgusted, and I seriously don't know what to do. So my boyfriend thinks I'm a complete liar and has been calling me that for the past few weeks. He believes other people's stories over mine. He is close friends with my sister, and while I don't know what she tells him, I do notice that he believes her over me. Last night, I was supposed to come over to his house to spend time with him and go to the store, and I thought we were going to see each other early, about 7 o'clock p.m. So I started to get ready. I was waiting for him for hours to text me when he came over, because he was out and wouldn't be home until 10 o'clock or something like that, and told me to leave at 10:10 because he believed he'll be home by then. My sister came over to my house around 8 o'clock while I was getting dressed to drop something off and left seconds later. Earlier this same day, my sister told me she had been terrified because she said that she felt like her ex was following her at her home. I told my mother about it, and around that time, my sister stopped answering the phone. So my mom got worried and told her I would drive past her house on my way to see my boyfriend. Around 10 o'clock p.m., I get some gas. I drive past my sister's house, then to his house. While I was leaving from driving past my sister's house, he calls me and asks what I'm doing, which I then explained. I get to his house and he starts questioning how I'm dressed. Because of the way I was dressed, he told me that I went out to another guy's house before coming to his. I mean, I really dressed up to come see him, and I felt like I always dressed up like that, but in his mind, I don't. And I was apparently dressed too differently and much better than he expected. No matter what I told him though, he didn't believe me. I slept over at his house and woke up and went home before he got up for work. It was a good night and a good time until this afternoon, when he calls me to tell me that I'm a liar and that it is over. He said that he just got done speaking to my sister, and according to her, I didn't leave the house at 10 p.m., but instead, apparently, I left at 8 p.m. She didn't talk to me the entire day, and I didn't come from my sister's house when he called. I tried to explain everything and send screenshots, as well as some kind of proof, but he wasn't trying to hear it, and told me it was over. He told me he was tired of my lying, and that when I'm ready to have a real conversation about things, only then can we talk. He then hung up on me. I have more proof of me leaving the house, but he refuses to see it. I tried to talk to my sister, and she confirmed everything I said, but thinks he must have gotten some parts that she said confused. She didn't know that I drove by her house, but did mention that she did see me at 8 p.m., but said that she didn't say that was the time that I left. Hours all before this happened, he called me, but I was asleep, then texted me to never text him again, stating that he doesn't want to talk to me anymore, all because I didn't answer the phone right when he called. And now everything's led up to this. I've been trying to call and text him, but he won't answer. I sent him screenshots of proof, and he left my text undelivered, which is rarely like him. Fast forward, and he called me last night to tell me that he was just joking about everything and just didn't understand why I was lying. I was was trying to get an understanding on what was going on and try to talk about it, but he's pretending like none of this happened and keeps changing the subject to something else. Apparently, it was a joke from both of them, and this is the second breakup joke that they've done on me. I accuse them both of having something going on, and my sister thinks my boyfriend and I have mental issues. But honestly, this entire situation was so upsetting, and I seriously don't know what to do. So let me just get this straight. Your boyfriend as well as your sister went behind your back, coordinated some joke of him breaking up with you, and then collectively came back together to be like, psych, just kidding. Like, that is unbelievably toxic. And I think your suspicions of your boyfriend as well as your sister having something going on is probably accurate, because it really screams that they're definitely going around behind your back. I mean, this guy wouldn't even look at screenshots, he wouldn't look at any kind of proof, but instead he wants to play games. And these are games that are at your expense and your happiness. I know if I was in your shoes, I would be so upset not only with my sister for lying to me, but also for my boyfriend treating me like garbage and lying about wanting to break up. He sounds like a basket case, and I really think you deserve a lot better than somebody who's just gonna use your relationship as a running joke and completely push aside your feelings and your mental well-being. You seriously deserve better than that, and your boyfriend does not sound like a good person. My entitled manager throws me under the bus at work, causing me to lose status in the office, as well as to lose any type of raise, annual bonus, or promotion, simply because she claimed I was being insubordinate, as well as being combative towards her, my superior. But in the end, I get the last laugh, as she got fired for creating a hostile work environment, and the supervisor over her was asked to step down for poor performance. Here's what happened. So this happened to me some years ago when I worked in the call center of a Midwestern bank. I was working as an online banking support technician, essentially phone-based tech support. The job was pitched to me as a non-customer facing technical role, but barely a week after I started, we were told that we were technically within the call center's chain of command, and thus we had to start taking calls, even though all the service reps had access to the online banking system and were trained for basic troubleshooting. Think password changes, unlocking locked accounts, stuff like that. Well, cue the transferred calls. I'd pick up the phone, and the rep would say something akin to, "I have a customer who needs online banking assistance," then quickly transfer the call before I could ask for specifics. The customer would only need their password reset and would be upset that they would have to be transferred, and then they would take it out on me. I have to say though, there is a large number of people who should never use a computer again. So one day I was working the Saturday shift. The call center was run with a skeleton crew, and our team was just one person on weekends. Midway through my shift, the call center assistant manager came into our area. Now this manager had a reputation for being a complete jerk, especially to the people that she did not like. She played favorites pretty badly, and I was in her sights. For the sake of the story, we'll call her Karen. She says to me, "Hey, I need you to add this account to a customer's profile," and then hands me a piece of paper. I pull up the account she specified, as well as the online profile, and I see that the account and the profile belong to a business account. Now this is a massive red flag, because business accounts have very specific rules to follow, one of which is that a form needs to be filled out and signed by one of the authorized signatories for that business. This is because many businesses have employee users who are able to view account details or transfer funds within accounts, but are not authorized to modify the accounts or the profiles on behalf of the business. Think people in accounting or billing, stuff like that. I look at her and I say, "Sure, do you have a signed business form or is one in the works?" The entitled Karen then says, "No, I just need you to add the account. The customer's on the phone." So I respond by explaining that we can't add an account to the business without a signed form. But this entitled Karen tried to go over my head. She looked at me and said, "I am authorizing it. Do it on my authority." But I did not trust that in the slightest, because I knew for a fact she would hang me out to dry. So I say to her, "Okay, just send an email authorizing the change and I'll add the account." But she was not willing to comply, because she said she needs the account added now, and that apparently I'm keeping the customer waiting. So I said, "Well, I'll start setting it up, but even so, it will take about 5 minutes. Just send me a quick email authorizing the change, and we'll use it to get started." The entitled Karen then leaves without another word, and a few minutes later, an email arrives. I save the changes, and the job is done. Or so I thought. On Monday morning, guess what happens? I was working at my desk when my supervisor comes over. She asked me to follow her to the conference room, where she shut the door. We'll call her Becky, since Karen is already being used. Becky looks at me and says, "Karen told me that she had an incident with you on Saturday. Is that true?" I looked at her and I said, "We had a discussion, but I would hardly call it an incident." She asked me to add a business account without a form, which is a procedure violation. violation. Becky then told me that this Karen said I was being insubordinate as well as combative, and I responded by saying, "I'm sorry, what?" All I did was tell her that we needed the form or an email from her authorizing the break-in procedure. I was neither combative or insubordinate. Becky then said, "Well, it's your word against hers, and she is the manager, so I need to believe what she has told me." I looked at her and I said, "Seriously? I have the email from her in my inbox where we broke procedure." Becky then said, "Still, when a manager gives you an order, you obey it. You do not question it." So I said that when the spot audit finds that I added a business account without a signed form, what are we going to do then? Becky then said that it doesn't matter. You follow orders. Consider this a verbal warning, and if your insubordination continues, it will result in further penalty. A few months later, I received my annual review. The incident was noted in the review, and my overall rating had been downgraded. We use a 4-level system, A being the best and D being the worst. I went from a B down to a C on the basis of my insubordination. This had the direct effect of reducing my raise to a negligible amount. I got no annual bonus and I got no promotion. I left the job for a new technical role a year later. But you know what? Karma seemed to have my back, as I later found out that the entitled Karen was fired for creating a hostile work environment. Thank you, HR, you finally made a good call. And Becky was asked to step down as a supervisor due to her poor performance. She walked off the job that same day. So honestly, I'm glad I don't work there anymore, and I'm glad that this entitled Karen and this entitled Becky got exactly what was coming to them. Yeah, both of them sound absolutely insane. The fact that Becky was saying you gotta follow it without any kind of question is, in my opinion, completely ridiculous. No, if we're breaking procedure and possibly breaking the law, sorry, but I'm gonna question it, and I'm gonna press you for more information on what it is we're exactly doing, and how this is not okay in the slightest. Like, I think the original poster's instincts was correct. This stupid Karen really was gonna leave them out to dry. They were not gonna defend them in the slightest, and they 100% were gonna throw them under the bus. I mean, just look at what happened. The original poster got downgraded and didn't get a bonus or any kind of promotion. Like, that is honestly ridiculous. So it looks like the original poster did get the last laugh, as the entitled Karen and Becky of this story either got fired or was forced to step down. And that's honestly what you get for having such poor management skills and throwing people under the bus who are clearly just trying to get their job done in the correct manner. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My entitled roommate and her boyfriend constantly claimed that me and my other roommates were making a huge mess in our communal home. But the fact of the matter is that she, as well as her boyfriend, were the sole reason for any kind of mess downstairs. And I honestly couldn't stand it, and I decided to get some revenge. Here's what happened. So for a bit of context, my friends and I house shared with the worst people ever. They were a couple. They were loud, they were messy, they were gross. They shouted and swore all day and night. They took priority over all communal spaces and made it seem like we weren't even welcome in our own home. They also stole from us constantly. Here's the kicker though. Despite all that, they were very, very strict on house rules. And this was obviously for us, not for them. We would get screamed at if we made any noise while they were sleeping, but they would stomp around the house, shouting and swearing, slamming all the doors at 3 a.m. as much as they like. Obviously, this house wasn't this haven of peace. It was an 8-person student house, so you can expect a bit of noise and a mess. We tried explaining to them that if they can leave their dishes to rot and mold in the kitchen, we could maybe get a bit more slack with what we were allowed to do. For example, if we left a cup next to the sink overnight, they would break it. They would try to paint this picture of us as being these horribly messy and inconsiderate housemates, when in reality, we were literally just too scared to leave our rooms, and we lived off takeaway for months just so we wouldn't make any kind of mess. We did everything. The cleaning of the whole house, the garbage bins, as well as cleaning up their mess. And as mentioned above, we stayed in our rooms and would go to each other's rooms and didn't cook in their kitchen or go downstairs for anything. So when we stopped cleaning the downstairs, we were never down there, so there was no mess that we made. It started to get messy from their own doing. Empty drink bottles everywhere, cushions thrown around, rubbish all over the floor. One of them finally decides to tidy up their own mess before they left for a few days. And once they were gone, we were finally able to relax and chill downstairs. We didn't feel anxious anymore, and we were able to go out and do something without feeling forced by this couple to bring them with us. It was all brilliant and it was all good. All the way up until we got a text message stating, "Can we make sure to keep the house tidy as I've just cleaned all of downstairs as it was so messy." Now, when I saw that, this text message changed something in me. I don't know if it was the acting like cleaning up your own mess is this amazing favor, or acting like it wasn't her and her boyfriend's mess she cleaned up, and us disgusting little rats would mess up her beautiful cleaning job instantly. So I decided to clean. I picked up everything in the living room and the kitchen that belonged to them and put it in a nice big pile over their personal hob. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Bits of their rubbish, their moldy mugs and plates that had insects on them. I mean, the man had a whole countertop dedicated to empty spice containers. And in contrast, I wasn't allowed my cup with my cutlery in it on the countertop. When they found the pile, they asked me why I didn't just throw out the rubbish. I said something along the lines of saying, "You said that you clean these rooms, so I just assumed you wanted to keep the moldy wrappers since they've been here for weeks." I honestly just wanted to show them that they also make mess too, a lot more than anyone else here, while also showing that her impeccable cleaning absolutely missed a few spots. But needless to say, I'm so glad I don't live with these people anymore, because I think I would have gone crazy if they blamed the messy house on me or my roommates ever again. These housemates sound absolutely obnoxious. Imagine that. You're just trying to live and have some kind of life, and you've got two people in the house who are not only incredibly messy, but they also blame that mess on literally everybody but themselves. Like, if you think about it, that's not fair in the slightest. They are literally the ones that are leaving everything out, and they're causing so many problems all around the house itself. Like, you and your roommates stay up in your room and you don't even go downstairs. So there's no reason for them to be like, "Oh, you guys are making such a mess." Absolutely obnoxious, and for the sake of the original poster and their roommates, it really is a good thing that you don't live with them anymore. Because from the sounds of it, these two roommates sound like awful people. My entitled supervisor demands that I start punching in all my hours at work, but as a result, they come to find out pretty quickly that I book a lot of overtime at the office, and now they're forced to pay me so much more than they would have if they had just left me alone and let me do my job. Here's what happened. So I'm a 31-year-old male, and I started working for my uncle 2 years ago. He has a company with some business partners of his, and my work is now being directly under him, learning every perk of running the business, and also being a personal assistant to him as well. We settled on a contract in which I would receive a fixed monthly income with a bonus of an additional salary by the end of every year. And while I had no overtime pay, I did have total control over my work schedule. And by total, I mean absolutely total, where I could come to the job just 3 days a week as long as I delivered results. My uncle knew my work ethics, so it was kind of a win for him, since when needed, I would work 60 to 65 hours a week, and that's if I needed to. Also, I could work during a holiday. Also, I was available on call nearly every day 24/7, so if anyone needed anything from me related to work, I was there. Now, work was running great until September last year, when my uncle took a couple of days to travel to another state to meet some new clients, and one of his associates by the name of Gordon, that's not their real name, took over his role in the company for those days to support some of his roles. Due to having worked a 14-hour shift the day before the travel, and also having two 12-hour shifts the week before, I was absolutely tired. And since we had little to no work piled up, I took an early leave the first day that he was there, and arrived way after lunch the day after. I then started working normally from the third day until we came back a week later. Now, he was furious at my attitude, berating my uncle for even contracting me in the first place, since I don't even work full regular hours, and demanded among the other business partners that I at least punch in my working hours, and if I don't meet the quota, those will be deducted from my monthly pay. Now, there's a ton of labor laws where I live. Employees have a certain amount of hours required to work each month, and every hour short of that is deducted from the monthly payment, and every hour beyond that is paid as overtime. Other partners backed up Gordon's claim, stating that I needed more supervision on what I was doing, in which my uncle was forced to comply. His only remark was saying, "Since we're doing this by the law, it means that we will also pay him overtime according to the law, right?" They all agreed, and from October forward, I would start punching my hours on the job every day. So this is when I decided to maliciously comply. Gordon was expecting a decrease on my pay due to being in the company at my least busy week since I arrived, when in fact, I usually pull a bunch of overtime. Also, if they needed to call me after I left, they had to punch in the hours from the moment I left until I finished the call, resulting in free overtime pay. One more thing, by the law, the rate of overtime pay increases the more overtime is done in a month. And it's a really weird formula, but to simplify, my average overtime hours pays a third higher than the average overtime hours of other employees. And these are people that would have the same monthly salary as me. My monthly income is now 30% higher due to the overtime that I started receiving. And to top it all off, in a busy month, that could get even closer to 50% higher, even though I am actually working a little less than before. And Gordon can't go back in the same situation as before, since my uncle made sure that once I started punching my hours, there was no going back, and that all the partners approved. So at the end of the day, I come home with some pretty good paychecks, and there's not a thing that Gordon can do about it. Your uncle sounds absolutely amazing. He knew exactly what was going to happen, and he let them set themselves up for you to get a fat paycheck every month. And that's honestly fantastic. Gordon could have just kept things the way they were. He could have just let you do your own thing, and you could have easily just made your money and went along your way. But he decided to be weird, and as a result, he's costing the company a lot more money than you're probably worth. And that's not an insult. That just means that, you know what? They're probably overpaying you big time, and there's not a thing they can do about it. So honestly, good for you for getting a fantastic paycheck. You're actually getting paid for all your hours, and at the end of the day, there's no one to blame except for Gordon as well as the rest of the partners. My new roommate is absolutely terrified of me, to the point where she is sick to her stomach, all because of a previous roommate that was awful to her for several years. And now I feel stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I seriously don't know what to do. So I'm currently in a housing program in an eastern state in the United States. I don't want to go into specifics, but basically this program is for underprivileged youth. You get discounted rent as well as utilities as long as you're in some sort of trade or working. This lasts until you're about 25, and then after that they kick you out. And at the time of this incident, I was 20 years old and my roommate was 22. You live in a dorm building, and each dorm is like a 2-bedroom apartment, and you can get your own room while also getting assigned a roommate. You also get assigned a counselor who checks in on you once a week. I didn't get to meet my roommate before I moved in. My counselor warned me before I moved in, literally a couple of hours before, that my roommate is very nervous, as she's had very scary experiences with her previous roommates and could be a bit on the shyer side. I asked about it more, and apparently the previous roommate was psychotic and would say some horrible things to my now roommate, and this was all over small things. She also refused to do chores, she was sneaking in people to scare the roommate, she was breaking all the rules, she was stealing and breaking this roommate's things, as well as getting violent when she got angry, like slamming the doors, punching the walls, and throwing things around. She refused to pay any of the bills and was damaging the roommate's credit, and basically making my roommate afraid to even be inside her own home because she was terrified of her. They said because of rules, they didn't kick her out for 2 years. That is until the neighbors called the police enough times for the program to finally take action. Now, when I heard this, I was absolutely mortified. I asked why they didn't kick her out sooner, but she just ignored that. She later said that she was new to the program as a counselor, so she only knew what her colleagues had told her. So with all that in mind, I tried to approach my roommate as nicely as I could at first. She is a no BS type of person, and she was kind but made it very clear that she wasn't going to be bullied in her own house, and told me what rules were in place and that we were expected to follow them. They weren't strict or anything like that, so I just agreed to it and things were fine. However, she is very cautious around me, and it's to the point where I kind of feel uncomfortable around her. Now, I really do feel selfish for that, considering what she went through. She lets me use her silverware and plates, but if she sees me using it, she will go into her room and write down what I'm using, as well as what time I picked it up. She doesn't speak to me other than stuff regarding the house, and she will get uncomfortable if I'm in the same room and then suddenly leave. I tried to make friends with her, but she says she's too uncomfortable with the idea of being friends with somebody she lives with, and wants to keep everything as professional as possible. The other day, I overheard her appointment with her therapist. They were talking in her room. She didn't know I was home. She was bawling her eyes out, telling her therapist she hates me, how she realizes I'm not like her past roommate, but she just hates having a stranger so close to her, that I could snap and change at any moment, and that at any moment I could attempt to harm her, just like her previous roommate did. She started screaming about how she's throwing up constantly from the stress of simply being near me, which by the way is true. She is really sick all of the time, and I have heard her throw up before. She explained that her friends even refused to come over because of how scary the previous roommate was, and she's afraid that I could be just like that. After I heard that, I left and went to my boyfriend's house for a couple of days. But when I explained to him exactly what's going on, he got angry and said she shouldn't talk about me like that in the slightest. Now, just for some context, I can't afford to live on my own currently, and I can't live with my boyfriend or my family, but I feel so uncomfortable uncomfortable. And this is all from me knowing that I'm making her so miserable. I know I didn't do anything wrong, and I know that none of this is my fault in the slightest, but the way she was crying, she sounded so terrified. I hated making someone feel like that. It really broke my heart overall. I brought it up with my counselor, and she says they can't do anything about it right now, and they can't move me. So overall, I should just leave her alone. I'm really stuck on what to do because I seriously feel miserable and I really don't know what to do. Yeah, that is an awful situation. I seriously cannot imagine having a roommate like that who would treat me like garbage, who would break my stuff, who would basically freak out over the smallest things, and then she would refuse to pitch in and pay for rent or anything else like that. Like, how on earth could this program seriously let this slide and allow this roommate to treat this other woman like that? Not to mention to let that happen for 2 years. Like, consider the circumstances. It's already a really hard situation for everybody involved. There's clearly something that went wrong in both of these people's lives, and they're living in this communal dorm just to try and get things together. And it literally took the police being called multiple times just to try and get this program to step in and do their job. So to that end, I really don't blame the original poster's roommate for being cautious and having some kind of anxiety about the situation. Because I mean, technically she is right. The original poster could snap and become a monster. Like, for me personally, I really do think anyone could do that, but it really doesn't sound like the original poster would ever become that in the slightest. They've tried their best to do everything right, and they've tried their best to make friends, but it's just not working. So honestly, in my opinion, I think you just need to reciprocate the way she's treating you. Don't try to be friends, just be roommates. And unfortunately, and it may sound insensitive, but if this roommate is seriously that uncomfortable, then that's not on you, that is on her completely. That's for her to figure out. You've not done anything wrong, you've not done anything to offend your roommate, and any kind of preconceived notions that she has, regardless of who her roommate was previously, is literally on her shoulders. So I would just try and live your life as quietly as possible. Wait until the day that you can move out, and then get out of there as soon as you can. Because this roommate seriously has some stuff they need to work out, and honestly, none of it is your responsibility in the slightest. An entitled guest gets up in my face, screams at me, and makes me cry. So I cuss him out, I flip him the bird, and I walk out, quitting on the spot. Here's what happened. So it was a Sunday morning of my shift, meaning I'm going to be working alone. With a pretty high turnover rate, I was one of the longest working employees there. So my manager gleefully deemed me manager on duty while she was not on site. A couple attempts to check in at around 10 o'clock in the morning. We had a full house the night before. I kindly let them know that check-in time is at 3 p.m., but I would happily let them check in early once a room became available. I showed them the lobby with a large screen TV and coffee station where they were more than welcome to hang out, and I also offered to take down their phone number if they would rather take advantage of the many nearby shopping and dining options that we had in the area while their rooms were still being cleaned. They obliged and went on their way, leaving their phone number behind. They then returned approximately 20 minutes later. They said, "We're here to check in," very matter-of-factly. A little caught off guard, I re-explained that checkout wasn't until 11 o'clock in the morning, and housekeeping would need some time to clean the room, but I would get them in as soon as possible. Even offered to go grab a few snacks from the closed kitchen for them to enjoy while they waited. The man at this point became incredibly irritable and told me that was unacceptable, and he demanded an upgrade to a suite for their troubles. I of course apologized and explained that we were unable to accommodate that request, and reiterated the reason for the situation to him, and politely offered the same solutions as before. But he grew more irate and not only demanded an upgrade, but he now wanted their night comp for free because their room was not ready when they tried to check in. He demanded to speak to a manager, and at that point, a part of me crumbled inside when I had to explain to him that I was the manager on duty, but also followed up that I could leave a message for the GM to contact him first thing in the morning once she got in. Now, I'm timid even to this day, but at the age of 18, several years back, I really didn't do well with being yelled at. I'm apologizing, my voice is shaking, I'm explaining again that they reserved a certain type of room, and I would still gladly let them know once that became available. Guests are now lining up behind the counter at this point, many of them looking pretty uncomfortable, just being witnesses to the situation themselves. I kindly asked the couple if they would mind stepping to the side so I could help the others while we waited for their room. But he refuses and tells me that he will not allow me to help anyone else until I grant him his demand of a free suite with immediate check-in. I again tell him that's not possible, and I try to excuse myself to speak to the person behind him. He steps in front of me anytime I try to take a step to the side to just make eye contact with the woman in line behind him. In my tiny shaking voice, I let him know if he does not remove himself from from the front desk and allow me to help other guests, I will have no choice but to call the police. He's now yelling at me. He's going to call corporate. This is unacceptable. How dare I do this? And so on and so on. He wants a comment card now. My hands are shaking, and when I put the card on the desk, it slips over the other side and onto the floor in front of him. He then demands that I walk around the desk and pick it up for him. And that was all I could really handle. In full-on tears at this point, I stick up my middle finger, I flip him the bird, and I say to him, screw you, screw this job, I quit. And after that, I walked out the front door, leaving a lobby full of guests still waiting to be helped. From my car, I called my manager, still crying, letting her know I cursed out a guest in front of other guests, and I walked out with no one to cover the shift. She said, I'm on my way, don't leave. The police showed up at the same time as her. She called them herself. She actually told me I was not allowed to quit, but instead told me that I had the rest of the day off. For several weeks, the couple called the hotel every few days to complain again about their experience, lying about details and omitting everything about the man's aggressive behavior, saying things like, we can't stop thinking about how we were treated. We've been praying over this nonstop. So honestly, I'm so glad I don't work at this place anymore, because these types of experiences really make me not want to work in this business ever again. What a crazy situation to be stuck in. And that man was completely out of line. Absolutely unacceptable behavior, and seriously, he should have had the cops called on him. Like, does he not realize he's screaming at a child right now? Like, literally an 18-year-old teenager. Like, what is wrong with people? If that was me and I was in that situation, after the second time of him screaming at full voice, I would have told him he can either get out of my face or he can get in this cop car that's on its way. Like, there's no way I'm gonna put up with that for a second. But I totally understand someone being 18 years old and being screamed at by a fully grown adult. Like, what is wrong with people? So hopefully you found better jobs in the future. And also, what is with the manager saying you can't quit? You absolutely can quit. I would have quit right then and there and been like, oh, I can't quit? Try and stop me. Like, they absolutely can't force you to stay at that job. Like, that's ridiculous. So hopefully wherever you work now, it's a lot better than what you dealt with here, because that situation seriously was crazy, and no one ever deserves to get treated like that in the slightest. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. An entitled man refuses to follow the rules, and as a result, he cost his company over $10,000, and it was honestly all completely his own fault. Here's what happened. So for a bit of context, I'm a 27-year-old female, and I work for a small local security company. We mainly do oil, gas, and logging roads. I typically work pipeline security, but I'm between sites at the moment waiting for spring breakup, and this is when the ground starts to thaw and heavy equipment and trucks can't operate because this is a swampland. Before breakup, they've got a 24/7 log haul happening on one of the biggest logging roads in our area. Now, because of this, traffic going against the log trucks is being restricted by us. I sit down at the far end of the log road and control who can go through the wrong way. Now, this is limited to 3 companies, as well as their subcontractors, because their sites are close to my end of the road, and they don't interfere with the log trucks. Any company that is in violation of this rule receives a $10,000 fine, and their road use privileges are affected. In this case, they can still only travel one way on the road once breakup hits, and the log haul has stopped, all the way up until the log company says otherwise. Now, one company in particular has always been one massive pain the entire time. For privacy reasons, we'll call them Stupid Incorporated. Now, Stupid Incorporated's site sits about halfway down the log road. They have to go down to the far end of the road and drive the same direction as the log trucks. Well, they don't bother telling their subcontractors this. So all day, every day, I'm busy turning these guys around. One morning last week, this big pickup truck pulls up, and I ask the usual, where are you headed? He then gave me the kilometer number of where the site is. And you guessed it, it's Stupid Incorporated. Only this guy gives me a different company name, which is one of the subcontractors. Knowing exactly what he was trying to do, I informed the guy that he couldn't go this way, and that is when he lost it. He starts cursing and swearing, yelling about how it's complete BS, and I shouldn't be allowed to do this. He tells me he's gone this way down the road plenty of times when he's not working, and it's never been an issue. The thing is that private users, so just regular people, are technically allowed to do whatever they want. Legally speaking, we can't stop them, as roads are public to a degree. There's a whole thing that I'm not going to get into, but private users are allowed to use the road, though we strongly caution against it. So he then says, all right then, I'm a private user, and you can't stop me. But I respond by saying, you just told me that you're here for work, but all right, if you say so, you've been warned. He then floors pours it down the road. What followed was a 4-day manhunt. I immediately notified the road patrol supervisor, as well as road patrol and my boss. I was asked questions for 4 days while they tried to identify this guy. Because he said he was going to work for Stupid Incorporated, they were the ones that got hit with a fine. And of course, it didn't go well over for them either. The next thing I know, the site superintendent is asking me tons of questions about the guy. When I said he worked for the subcontractor, well, that didn't go well either. From my understanding, the subcontractor that this guy was quoting was at risk of losing the contract that they had with Stupid Incorporated all over this. The subcontractor then started digging around, and I heard they found out exactly who it was. And you guessed it, this guy lost his job over it. And you want to know what the kicker is? He wasn't even working for Stupid Incorporated that day. The superintendent told me they didn't even have this subcontractor out working on anything. One of his employees had seen the truck I described way on the other side of Stupid Incorporated's site. He hadn't even stopped there. As far as anyone knows, he actually was there as a private user. And had he just said as much, none of this would have happened in the first place. Talk about digging your own grave. This guy is actually just a complete idiot. He either seriously miscalculated how he could get his job done, or he put his foot in his mouth, trying to act like some kind of big shot, as if he could go through this territory without any kind of problem. So honestly, in my opinion, this guy definitely deserved to get fired, because the way he reacted to being told, no, you gotta turn around, was completely inappropriate. Not even mentioning the fact that he cost this company over $10,000 simply because he was being an idiot. My boyfriend has been getting upset about me with the way I use my finances, and despite explaining everything to him, as well as showing him blatantly that I don't spend needlessly, he still thinks I'm very irresponsible with my money. And at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. So this happened 2 days ago, and my boyfriend and I have been arguing ever since. So I work in homeless services, and lately one of my clients has been carrying his belongings in a garbage bag. I had this really nice North Face bag that I got a few years ago, but didn't really use it in the slightest. I wanted to give this backpack to my client so he could comfortably carry his things in. I was sharing this with my boyfriend, and he was more concerned that I just gave away a really nice and expensive backpack when I could have sold it instead. I explained to him that I got it years ago and didn't end up liking it after using it for a while, and I also got it with a gift card, so it's not like I actually used my money on it. He thinks I just throw money away by giving away things I don't want anymore. For example, these are just a few that he's given me. When he lost his AirPods, I gave him my old pair, or these shirts that I thrifted 10 years ago, I gave them to him as well because they were more his style than mine anyways. He just thinks I just throw money away. I also really like nice things like jewelry, purses, and nice clothes. I don't really spend a lot of money all the time, but sometimes I like to spoil myself every now and then with the money I earned for all the hard work I do at my job. His biggest concern is that we should pay off our student loans first, and then when they are paid off, we can spend money on whatever we want. And while that sounds pretty nice, I'm probably going to be paying off my loans for the next 30 to 40 years, maybe 50, or until I'm off the earth. Regardless, I don't want to stress myself out and literally just be working to pay them off. I'm on top of my loans and my bills every month, and I still have money left over. I don't always spend it, but again, if I see something I like and it's not going to put me in a financial bind, I might just get it. He would rather spend money on expenses rather than the materialistic things, and he thinks I'm being materialistic when I don't believe I am in the slightest. This whole argument has made me feel like I did the wrong thing, and I'm questioning if I'm in the wrong about everything, and I honestly don't know what to do. It really is unfortunate the way your boyfriend is acting, because I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to pay things off as well as spending money on yourself. Like, there's literally nothing wrong with that in my opinion. I think you've made it clear that you really do pay off your loans, and you're on top of everything that comes your way. It's not like you're slacking in any kind of department, or you're choosing to buy things instead of paying for your loans or your bills. Like, you sound like a responsible adult. And you're right, you're probably going to be paying off those loans for a long time. So with his logic, you literally will never be able to buy yourself anything anytime soon. So I think maybe re-explaining to him that, hey, this is first off my money, but also I'm on top of my loans. There's no reason why I can't just buy something for myself if I want it. From what you've described, it really doesn't sound like you're doing anything that would put you in financial danger. So the fact that your boyfriend is acting this way is really annoying. In my opinion, I really think you should be responsible for your own money, and the same goes for him. I mean, you're not going to him and saying, hey, this is how you need to spend your money. So why on earth would he go to you and try and lecture you about what you should and shouldn't buy? So hopefully there's some kind of middle ground here, because the way your boyfriend's acting is really inappropriate. inappropriate in my opinion, and I really do think he needs to reevaluate his position. My entitled boss refuses to listen to me when I try to explain them how to properly clean a new piece of equipment we got at our store, and as a result of being forced to do it her way, we effectively ruined a machine that we only got just a few weeks prior, and it really is entirely her fault. Here's what happened. So I used to work at a deli shop / cafe place just to make ends meet while I went to university, and the owner of that place was a real piece of work. If you got on her bad side, you were on her list, and she would be both openly and passively aggressive with a general vibe that you were a complete idiot no matter what you did. I heard that woman scream at a 15-year-old on her second day because she had mixed up coffee and teacups, which differed in size by about an ounce, and that is just a taste of her personality. After this whole experience, my dad told me that as a general hint, it may be good to be suspicious of a workplace that hires exclusively teen girls with no experience, because they're very unlikely to recognize horrible workplace treatment. There were 2 people in this place who didn't take her garbage at all. Me, a mid-20s recovering addict who has seen way worse than what this lady could dish out, and a 45-year-old Iranian man who told her that she could get lost, especially when she berated him for not being willing to come in early to his 11-hour shift to prep for ingredients. And of course, this would have been off the clock, so I honestly really liked that guy. So with the stage set, this is when my malicious compliance came in. When I started, this place desperately needed a new wheel meat slicer. The one they had made a constant screeching noise and drove everybody crazy. About a month and a half into my employment, they got one. Industrial grade, cost like $5,000, but looked and worked accordingly. Amazing piece of kit. As we were all celebrating and unpacking it, I flipped through the instructions booklet to look up how it works and specifically how to clean it, as there were quite a few parts. The manual says to clean everything detachable thoroughly, but that the wheel itself should be cleaned by letting it run on a very slow speed and using a cloth and alcohol-based cleaning agent on the exposed part. There were some pictures and detailed instructions on how to do this specifically, and it explicitly stated not to take the whole wheel off and deep clean it, as this would remove the wheel lubrication as well as the anti-corrosive agent and risk damaging the machine altogether. And it was also especially clear to not let water or any cleaning agent get into the machine without making sure to thoroughly replace any lubricant. Anyways, I was working the evening shift, so 99% of the time, it was up to me to clean it. The instructions is how I clean the machine, because I trust the designer to know how to clean it. Or I do for about 2 days until my boss sees me, asks me what I'm doing, and why I'm not taking the wheel off to clean it. She berates me about food safety and hygiene standards, telling me how disgusting I am for doing it this way. I stand my ground and I inform her I do it this way because of the instructions, and that I'm just following the manual, and explain the reason behind it. If we scrub it down, especially the inner part, the grease will go away a lot faster and will risk damage to the machine. She basically tells me to shove it and to do it her way. Now, I'm not gonna ruin a $5,000 thing all because one woman doesn't understand how lubrication works, but the very next day, my manager sees me clean the machine and gives me an extremely condescending talk down on how this isn't how we approach hygiene. She also said, "The boss told me you don't understand food safety." My explanation falls on deaf ears again, and I'm also informed not only am I expected to take the wheel off and scrub it at the end of the day, but also after every use. My boss also wants me to make sure I spray the inside section to ensure that there's no bacteria in there, with some hints that there had apparently been a whole colony of life growing in there due to my 2-day negligence. She wants me to spray soap and water mixture into the cogs of the machine they just bought. The blade is stainless steel, but the cogs are not. But you know what? I said fine. If that's what you want me to do, that's what I will do. Every day, 5 times a day, I take that machine apart and I scrub it down. Every day I see that lubrication disappear more and more, and after a week it's all gone, eventually becoming replaced by growing patches of rust. Now, I feel bad for the machine, but I do as I've been told. I only work 6 days a week, so every day I come in after my break thinking that surely yesterday my manager would have reacted, but nope, she takes it apart just like I do, clean it in the same manner as I do, and doesn't seem to think twice about the fact that this brand new machine is rusting apart in front of our eyes. In fact, she goes the extra mile and also scrubs the cogs itself, which is probably why a year or so worth of lubricant disappeared in 1 week. Now, the thing about rusty machinery is that it usually works up until a certain point, but once it reaches that point, there's no going back. One day I turned it on, and it makes a screeching noise I can only imagine came from the soul of this bit of kit wondering why God had forsaken it. And it's like the clocks all stopped. My coworker in the pastry section comes over to ask what in the world that noise was. My boss and manager come into the room with the same question, but I just shrug and I slice my salami. The boss tells the co-owner to go get some lubrication for the gears, and after a minute, he puts some spray-on oil lube in front of me and tells me to lube the gears up. I ask him where the lithium lubricant paste is, since according to the instructions, that's what you need. And he seems flabbergasted that putting something made for hinges and ball bearings isn't appropriate for a meat slicer. 2 days and some tinnitus later, he's acquired some grease, and then proceeds to be stumped when I let him know I'm not going to stop doing my regular job to spend 30 minutes greasing up this machine unless someone else takes over my station or they pay me overtime. My boss is meanwhile demanding to know why I haven't told them that we need to stock up on lithium grease, which I don't even bother to respond to. I make sandwiches. I'm not your mechanic. I left that job a few weeks later, and when I did, the machine was still crying the song of its ancestors every time we turned it on, and we were still scrubbing it down from the inside out daily. I have since then gotten a sneaking suspicion that I know what happened to its predecessor, and me and my dad, who is actually a mechanic, still laugh about it sometimes. My boss did ask, rhetorically speaking, at one point how in the world the machine got to that stage so fast, but I answered that it's probably because we've been scrubbing the lubrication and the corrosive protection off several times a day, and I take great pleasure in the memory that she completely ignored me. It is the only time while I was there that she didn't snap back at me, and I like to think she remembered back to when I explicitly told her that if we clean this thing in that way, this is exactly what would happen. Overall, I don't think a $5,000 machine would make or break anything, but boy did that feel good. That boss is an absolute moron. Talk about not knowing what you're doing. This lady literally destroyed that machine. She had her worker taking it apart and basically slowly but surely destroying it one piece at a time. I mean, how stupid do you have to be? And this really did fall on deaf ears. I mean, the original poster tried to say, hey, we're ruining the machine by doing it this way, but this entitled boss was not hearing it. They just thought to themselves, no, I have to be right. It is my way or the highway. And that clearly is not the answer to this stupid decision. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to look at the manual and properly know how to clean that thing. And instead of listening to their coworker, they decided to act like they know best. And in effect, in just a few weeks, ruined a $5,000 machine. And I think the original poster is right. This is absolutely what happened to the previous meat slicer. I personally can't stand managers who act like this, who don't listen to the people underneath them and pretend like they know best. Because honestly, situations like this happen. And then guess what? They're gonna try and turn it on you and pretend like it's your fault. Thankfully though, it looks like the original poster was able to get out of there in one piece. And with all things considered, I don't blame them for quitting, because that boss sounded obnoxious, and you absolutely do not deserve to be treated like that in the slightest. An entitled man-child freaks out on me in the hotel lobby that I work in after the car valet isn't ready for him right when he demands it. And after some screaming and crying, as well as refusing to leave our hotel, I cancel his reservation and have the cops show up just to escort him off the property. Here's what happened. So I work the night audit shift. That's from 11 p.m. all the way up until 7 a.m. And I have to say, this is one of my favorite instances that I ran into, because the amount of karma that gets thrown down back at the person bothering me is absolutely beautiful to behold. So let's get started. So most of my problems usually happen right at the beginning of my shift. It's when the late check-ins start finishing up, but only with the drunk and the rowdy, and the occasional late flight. This man was of the drunk and rowdy nature. He was middle-aged, looked like the typical Marvel fan, from the shorts, the shirt, the beard, and the glasses. He reeked of neckbeard. We all know the type. Now, I'm a nerd too, but I'm the kind that takes showers and has friends and boundaries. I don't work alone, but was alone at the front desk at the time, and he comes up just to complain to me. He is checking in and stating that valet wasn't there, and he has been waiting for 20 minutes. I call valet and find out he has only been waiting actually for 5 minutes, and assure him that they are finishing up with a couple of guests and will be parking his car momentarily. But he would not let it go. He starts going on a rant about my terrible customer service, how there has got to be something I should do for him to make up for this, how completely unacceptable he had to wait at a luxury hotel for the valet, and he thought that this was the whole point of us being luxury. Now clearly he hasn't been to a hotel in general, never mind a nice one. I told him I talked to the valet, and it's normal for people to have to wait for others who were there first. So with that in mind, there was nothing I could do about it. It wasn't even an amount of time that I could fake being sympathetic for. He was clearly just being a jerk. He then keeps demanding an explanation from me as to why he was waiting, now trying to tell me I am lying to him and they were clearly sleeping or on a break or something like that. He then tells me to just cancel his reservation. So I say to him, okay, no problem. The valet was ready for you, but if this isn't what you wanted, I will go ahead and just cancel it for you. So I do just that, and I hand him his printed cancellation, but still he won't leave. Now he's standing at the front desk just staring me down and repeatedly asking me why he had to wait for valet while also demanding that I admit that they were just sleeping on the job. And it was about at this moment that I realized that this guy isn't seeing what's going on. And despite my attempts to communicate to this guy, he simply wasn't having it and decided to escalate things in a direction I honestly never expected. Eventually, I tell him that he no longer has a reservation with us and I will be calling security to escort him out as he is no longer a guest at our hotel. And when he responds by saying, whatever, that's fine, I go ahead and call security, and even then, he still won't leave. Once security arrives, he starts yelling at them as well, stating that he won't leave unless we call the cops on him. Yes, you heard that right. This entitled man-child literally asked us to call the cops on him. He then looked at me and said to me, you know you're not gonna win this one, right? Even though I was not trying to compete with winning anything here. So eventually the cops get here. They come up just to ask what was going on, and I honestly felt really bad for the cops because I knew this guy was just being an absolute jerk. I tell him he literally told us to call the cops on him to make him leave. So the cops go deal with him, and they tell him that not only are we not reinstating his reservation, which I guess he was trying to get them to do, but he had to call an Uber home and had to abandon his car at the hotel because he was way too under the influence to drive. The cops then literally made him call the Uber in front of them, get into it, and watch him leave. So this dude clearly had some sort of power struggle thing going on or some rough stuff going on at home. I don't know, and frankly, I don't care. He thought that he could just pick on some random hotel worker and instead got the biggest walk of shame I have ever seen anyone get, especially when he had to pay for an Uber as well as a cancellation fee and God knows what else just to get his car back. And all this just to be some kind of smug jerk. Wow, that guy seriously had a few screws loose. He tried the classic play of trying to cancel his reservation as some kind of collateral for him getting what he wanted. And this is all because he had to wait, what, 5 minutes just to get the car valet going? People who act this way really do make me sick. Because if he was just patient for just a few minutes, the valet literally could have taken his stuff away. But instead, he decided to act like a giant man-child. And with all things considered, karma came back to bite him hard. And it seems like he got exactly what was coming to him. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. This next one came from the Am I the Jerk podcast subreddit. Check the links in the description if you'd like to submit your own story. Am I the jerk for wanting to get my ex-fiance fired from her work after she tried to cheat on me multiple times? So I met my ex-girlfriend by the name of Mary, that's not her real name, in middle school a little over 7 years ago, and I was immediately in love with her when I saw her. And after knowing her for a year, we start to date and become a couple. We were both 17 at the time and were together for a little over 6 years. She was my rock with everything that happened in my life. When my mom passed away, she was the one I went to cry my heart out, and she would cheer me up. And when I was sad, she made me smile, and I did everything for her when she had it rough and needed someone. We weren't perfect, but no couple is. I could act a bit childish sometimes, and when she wanted me to do something that had to do with our future, I would try to do it, but I sometimes started way too late with it or couldn't immediately do it because of how busy my life could be. And she was no saint either. When we had a fight, the thing she always did was just ignore me instead of talking things through. And then I would have to be the one to apologize every time, even when it was her fault, or she would apologize and act like nothing happened. She also always said we both had to save some money for later, but when we saw something that we both liked, but was obviously meant for me, she would buy it even when I kept repeating that she didn't have to. Now, let's go back a month or two before posting this story. I am in university and she is working full-time, and I wanted to propose to her, but for some reason, I had a gut feeling that something was wrong with us for the last couple of months, but I had buried it all that time. One evening, I was reinstalling a messaging app on my laptop because I thought it would be easier to use it on that, but I saw Mary was still logged in from before I deleted it the first time. But right before I wanted to log out of her account, I saw that she had messaged a coworker of hers, and me being a curious idiot, thought it would be a good idea to start reading it. But when I did, my heart stopped for a little bit. My girlfriend and this person were trying to make arrangements to spend some quality time with each other before and after work. After After I read that, I was so sad. I just immediately started to cry, and I thought to myself, why would she do something like that? I then began to read as much as possible in the chat and discovered they thankfully hadn't done anything yet, but that she wasn't sure anymore if she wanted to stay with me because it felt like something was wrong with us. She had the same gut feeling that I had suppressed. This guy, we'll call him Josh, which is also not his real name, said to her, well, if you're not sure, then why did you stay with him? Mary responded by saying that she did still love me and I made her happy, but it felt like I didn't think enough about our future together, which I did, but she didn't know it. They started to talk about her problems at home, but also the times that she was alone at her house, so that if he wanted to come over, she would be alone. After reading that, I was so sad, but at the same time, I still loved her so much. So that weekend, I proposed to her, and she said yes, and we were so happy. We finally were becoming a family. At least that's what I thought. Right after the weekend, she told everyone that we were engaged, including everyone at work, and they were really happy for her. But I was no idiot. I had not deleted her account from my laptop yet, so I could see if they still talked about that, and what do you know, not even 2 days after the weekend, they were talking again about doing it, and she even looked a bit more eager than before. The weekend after the engagement, she suddenly wanted to talk, but I had to bring all her stuff I had with me, so I knew what was up. But honestly, I got angry. The weekend came and I took all her stuff with me to talk, and she said she wanted to break things off because she thought I didn't take our future serious enough. But then I got angry and said some very hurtful stuff to her, and she got sad when I said the hurtful things. As I calmed down and talked to her, I said that I did care about our future, and that I've been doing and planning things behind her back just to try and surprise her with. And even though she was surprised by me taking the initiative, I also told her I knew about the messages. Now, Mary didn't like that and accused me of not trusting her, but I said to her, can you blame me after what I read? You were trying to cheat on me. How do you think I should have reacted? After a bit of talking, we decided to give it another try, but I had to quit reading the messages, and she had to stop sending those kind of messages over to Josh. They were still coworkers after all, so I couldn't actually forbid her from talking with Josh. I guess I should have been firmer with her, because again, after the weekend, 3 days later, they started to message each other again, and going as far as suggesting that they could spend some quality time together at work after their hours. But at this point, I didn't have any sadness left, only anger. And at the end of the week, a friend of mine drove me to her house to confront her again, but she got angry again for reading the messages. We went back and forth again, and she ignored half the things I said as usual, but we gave it another shot and I stayed the night. But you know what? I began to see a pattern again, because yet again, after the weekend, she started to text him again, even saying that she wore something special for it if they wanted to do anything. Eventually, she got smart and changed her password, which I advised her to do if she didn't want me to read anything anymore. But honestly, I screenshotted every message they had with each other, including the one where they were talking about spending quality time at work, which if I were to send that to her work, they would both be immediately fired. She even deleted the old messages, but it was way too late for that anyways. The weekend came around and I was angry with her again, which she noticed right away and wanted to know what was going on. So I told her exactly what was happening, but this time I made it clear that I was angry. For the first time in our relationship, she was afraid of me because of the tone of my voice and my face. Mary started to cry and said she didn't want to lose me and begged me to give her yet another chance. I almost didn't give in, but then I started to think of everything we had done as well as everything we had been through together, and I gave her one last chance. After that, she got a message from Josh again, and I asked her if I could answer this time, and she said yes. The only thing I said is that I want him to leave her alone, which he answered okay and then blocked her on the app. Now fast forward to 3 days ago, Mary suddenly began getting a lot of messages again, but I thought it was one of her friends, so I just let it go. The next day, I came over for a bit before she went to work, and I took her phone to see if she had any new games on it. She always knew how to pick good games to play on her phones, but I accidentally opened up the wrong app. My fingers are pretty big, so this happens very often, even on my own phone. But I wanted to close it immediately because I also wanted her to trust me again. But the weird thing was, she had never messaged one of her friends the other day, which instantly felt like a red flag. Now on this phone, when you want to close the app, you can also see the icons of the last few that you've used. And I saw she recently used another messaging app, which I opened and saw that it was between Mary and Josh. Yes, they were messaging each other once again. He was talking about if she was sure that she didn't want to try and make arrangements again, just like they were trying to do last time. And she replied by saying, "We'll see. We still have a whole week." And after reading that, I got mad again, and I confronted confronted her about it, but she got angry and said that she didn't want to do anything with him. And in fact, I was the one in the wrong, and that she's just playing with Josh. After that, she went to work and called me that we're over, even when I said I want to talk to her to make things work again, but she kept refusing. So I guess we're now over after 6 years, but we are trying to maybe be friends again, because we've known each other our entire lives. But I am getting angry again, because she just lied to me again and again. So here comes the part where I might be the jerk, because she hasn't told her mom yet, but they also are having a rough time with each other right now. I still have the pictures of all their messages, and I want to send them to Mary's mom to let her know why we broke up, but I also want to send the messages of her and Josh wanting to spend some quality time together at work over to their bosses just to try and get them fired. Should I do it? Because at this point, I have nothing to lose anymore. What should I do? Honestly, I don't even know what to say to this story, because I really think the original poster in this story is a complete fool. You not only allowed your girlfriend to try and cheat on you several times, but you also didn't have the common self-respect for yourself to say, hey, guess what? We're breaking up. Like, that should have been a big red flag from the beginning. Regardless of how long you've been together, she was planning on cheating on you. Like, literally had plans in the works with a coworker to go behind your back and cheat on you with another man. That is messed up, and it blows my mind that your answer to that would be to then propose to her. Like, seriously, what were you thinking? Proposing to my girlfriend after finding out that she's trying to cheat on me is literally the last thing on my mind. I would be breaking up with her so fast it's not even funny. Like, legitimately, I think some of the blame here of all the anguish that you've gone through because of this absolutely is on your shoulders at this point. I can understand giving her one chance, but like, you've given her like, what, 4 chances already? And she's still going behind your back to try and get with this Josh guy? I mean, at that point, this is just self-inflicted problems. While I'm not going to tell you what you should or shouldn't do with those messages, I think your best course of action, though, is to start the process of moving on. Mary was not a good girlfriend, and while I think there was some kind of earnest attempt to try and get this to work in some way, I truly think it's in your best interest to move on and figure out what you want to do with your life, because Mary very clearly does not want to be a part of it. And at this point, I don't think any kind of conversation is ever going to get Mary to come back into your life and stay in your life. An entitled HOA tries to punish me and my family for putting cameras up on our home, telling us to stop them if we can, pushing us into a legal dispute that cost them thousands of dollars in the process. Here's what happened. So this happened several years ago and is a multi-year long story. So to start things out, we installed cameras in front of our home that were looking at our vehicles, and part of the camera angles did overlook parts of 2 neighbors' properties, one's backyard and one's side yard. The cameras were battery operated and had a function where you could gray out areas that you didn't want to film. When motion occurred in the grayed out areas, the cameras would not be activated to film. The neighbors' entire properties and several bushes on our property were grayed out, and we did this when installing them. One of the neighbors was a friend and had no issues with this whatsoever. We even showed her the camera angle, and she said she didn't care whether it was grayed out or not. But even with that in mind, we still left it grayed out. The other neighbor's name was Karen. Not really, but we all know why I chose that name. This entitled Karen was on the HOA board, and as you can imagine, we did not get along with this Karen or the HOA board in the slightest. We told the Karen about the camera and showed her the grayed out area at the same time that we told our friendly neighbor about it. It was simply an FYI conversation, and we were not asking for permission in the slightest. This entitled Karen told us to take the cameras down immediately, or else we would regret it. About a week after we hung up the cameras, we got a notice from our HOA that we were violating the bylaws. Now, what were the bylaws in question? It had to do with being a nuisance to your neighbor. There wasn't a specific bylaw preventing placement of cameras, so this is literally all they could find to try and punish us. We responded with a letter detailing how we were not violating any bylaws or laws in general, and we asked them to cease and desist. But I think we know where this is going to go, because they did not cease and they did not desist. And what was their first response? They said to me that the HOA has the right to enforce these bylaws. Just try and stop us if you think you can. And these types of responses were, unfortunately, quite common from this board. We eventually entered this battle with one goal in mind: to cost them as much money and time as possible. The HOA hired a lawyer specifically just to fight us. To my knowledge, this has not happened to any other resident. In the following 4 months, we ended up costing the HOA over $4,000 in lawyers' fees fighting this battle. For reference, the entire HOA income was maybe $25,000 a year. When it came time for our official official HOA hearing over the matter, we had successfully postponed it thanks to our attorney friend 3 separate times. There were over 100 back and forth emails with the HOA attorney as well as ourselves. Each one of those emails was a 15-minute expense for the HOA, so I was more than happy to follow up a follow-up question with another follow-up question if it meant the HOA attorney was going to keep billing them for their time. We didn't actually want to take this battle to court, so we ended up removing the cameras the day of the hearing just to prevent being fined, even if the fine wouldn't hold up in court. The HOA decided in the hearing that we were guilty of violating the bylaw, but they couldn't fine us, as the bylaws don't allow a fine until a hearing has been held, and the cameras were already removed. In the end, the punishment was a sternly written piece of paper on the attorney's letterhead, delivered via certified mail, that stated that we were not allowed to place a camera on our home that had the potential to invade a neighbor's privacy. Keep in mind though that the letter specifically stated that the camera could not be placed on our home, so we left the camera off of our home for about 4 months, all the way up until the annual HOA meeting. And you should have seen the look on the HOA board's face when I asked them to explain the $4,000 line item for attorney's fee that simply stated title searches attorney fees. The board actually tried to hide the fact that they had spent $4,000 trying to fight us over a couple of cameras by putting the fees in as a title search. Needless to say, the meeting did not go well for them. About half of them lost their positions on the board, while the other half did remain on the board. About a week after the annual meeting, we installed new cameras, facing the same direction as the prior ones, only this time, we installed a post in the ground and mounted the cameras on the post. The admonishment we received after the hearing specifically stated that we were not allowed to install cameras on our home, and said nothing about putting them on a post. They did send a letter to try and tell us to remove the cameras, but a sternly worded response indicating that we were prepared to fight them on this actually ended up working this time. I guess they didn't want to spend another $4,000 trying to fight us on this. And you know what? We didn't receive any follow-up responses after that. And even after 2 years and running strong, every single camera is still installed on their post, and we don't have any plans of taking them down anytime soon. I gotta be honest, as someone who deals with HOAs on occasion, it is fantastic to see someone else put these people in their place. I seriously can't stand HOAs in the slightest. I think they are a massive waste of time, and they are just a vampire for everybody else's money. So good for the original poster for literally wasting so much time for these people. And honestly, what a hilarious workaround. Putting that on a post that's not specifically on your house is such a funny workaround that I'm sure they were not expecting. But if anything, that'll hopefully teach them a lesson that they can't just try to bully somebody away and act like they can get away with anything, because eventually you're gonna run into someone who's willing to fight back, and the end result is gonna be the same. You're gonna be horribly embarrassed, and half your board is gonna lose their positions. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. An entitled guest freaks out on me, forcing me to run into the back office just to hide from her and call the police for some kind of safety, and I've never been more scared in my life. Here's what happened. So at 1:05 a.m., I was minding my own business, sitting at the front desk like I always do. A blonde 40-something woman comes down, tugging a coat over her arms. I greet her with a smile and I say good morning. The woman looks at me and rolls her eyes, asking me what time it was. I tell her the time and she just grumbles, "I got here at 8 p.m. and I'm waking up at 1 in the morning. Ask me again if I'm having a good morning." So it was pretty obvious we had a tired, grumpy guest. Well, it is early and I am on a night schedule, so it's no biggie. It doesn't bother me. I just laugh it off and mention how tired she must be, hoping to just smooth over her attitude with some positivity. But we only went downhill. She mentioned something about the hotel making a lot of money off of being greedy. I was a little shocked by this, since that wasn't the usual dialogue my NPC brain had to use. So I started to say, "We usually have a slow season when it comes to wintertime." She then interjects and says, "Are you the owner?" I blinked a few times and said, "No, I'm just the night audit." She then responded by saying, "Then don't say we. You are not we. You don't own the building." She banged on the fireplace a few times before tightening her coat around her. I thought for a few seconds about how odd this interaction was. If anything, this was just a weird encounter. But since she came from the elevator, she had to be a guest. The side doors were locked, and she mentioned paying for the room. So this had to be someone staying here intentionally. She was already being extremely hostile, and since I work alone, I needed some information off of her. I asked her what her room number is, hovering my fingers over the keyboard. If anything, this sounded like a complaint in the making, and after one of my previous experiences, I wanted to give my boss a heads up about a future issue so he could address it as soon as possible. I mean, he did tell us that our location gets fined $150 per complaint, so I wanted to help mitigate the issue. But the woman told me she didn't know her room number, so I raised my brow and I said, "Can I get your last name then?" This lady interrupted me mid-sentence and said, "I don't want to give you that." She looked me in the eyes when she said that, and right about then I knew this was about to be trouble. I responded to her by saying, "Then you need to leave." I basically gave her the option to either return to her room or go outside. I really did not know how to continue. I was sure that she was a guest, so I wouldn't have said anything if she had just gone back to the elevator. But in the lobby, fighting me was one place she wouldn't be. If she went outside, I'd ask for her name again to verify her identity. But I will say that I was getting worried about the confrontation. At this point, she pulled a key out of her pocket. She said to me, "You don't tell me what to do. I have a room here," which confirmed my previous expectations. Except now it escalated, and she was fast approaching me. There is no security guard, and I was starting to feel afraid. I told her if she did not leave the lobby, I would have the police come and remove her. She said to me, "I will do whatever I want. Call the police. See if I care." At this point, my hands were shaking. She was right up in my face. I did not feel like I could further de-escalate the situation, and she was obviously not acting right. I have never, not in my life, had a confrontation like this. I grab my phone and my keys, and I head into my safe zone, which is the laundry room, just to try and remove myself from the situation and calm us both down. Yes, I was still going to call the non-emergency phone number because I needed some assistance in figuring out what to do with her. Because honestly, we don't have any training on this kind of situation. I mostly just hoped that she would scamper off to her room, but she stayed out in the lobby, ringing the service bell, trying to get me to come back and face her. I whispered into my phone so I wouldn't anger that woman any further, watching her from the lobby cameras. The woman left the bell and began to rummage through our Uber cards, yelling about how much of a jerk I was. I watched as she eventually exclaimed that she doesn't have to wait here for this, and she began to walk back to the elevators, all the way up until she stopped and rushed to the office door to try and get to me. She actually pulled on the lock, trying to break in, and this is when I started to freak out to the dispatch. I begged dispatch for help and to send someone right away. Tears started flooding down my face. I have never had someone do this before. I was so scared because she may try to hop the counter, which is really low in one area, and the laundry door does not lock. Dispatch told me an officer was in the area and to stay where I was. The woman abandoned the door and went to the low area of the front desk. I held my breath. The laundry room door was ajar, and I was hiding in a corner, and she could still see into the room, just not where I was. She said, "I'll stuff you in a washing machine," and I just repeated it to the lady on the phone. Thankfully, the crazy woman decided against hopping the counter, and I watched as she went to our north-facing doors. She put on her hood, held the door open for a cigarette, and eventually dispatch hung up on me. I didn't realize that she did, and I just kept talking on the phone. I've never had them hang up on me before, but oh well. At that time, I could tell that this lady was talking to somebody, since her arms were flailing all over the place. I call my partner at the time for comfort, and then the police come and find me. I tell him the story above, reminding him I also have a camera to back me up on this. He asks me what I want to do, and I tell him that she has got to go. The officer advises me against it, which I thought was odd, but I told him that I am the only one on site, and she was no longer welcome at our hotel. He says okay, and she is brought through the front door. Anyways, I'm given her name and her room number, and she and her husband are the second highest shiny you can be for my brand, so I am absolutely shocked by her behavior. It's under her husband's name, whom the officer says is in the room with her. Now, apparently he was a swell guy, and he was sleeping peacefully until the cops came knocking on his door. He didn't seem surprised that his wife got them kicked out of a hotel at 2 in the morning, but I again told the police officer that I have cameras to back me up. I wasn't making up any of this. The cops tell me to go back to the laundry room while the couple wheels their luggage through the lobby and into their vehicle. They were even nice enough to wait while this crazy lady de-iced the windshield, only to then flip the bird to one of the officers as they were leaving. I tried to get a hold of my boss to see if I did everything right, but he has told me in the past that he turns his phone off at night, so I had no luck in getting in contact with him. I'm scared to think about what that woman would have done to me if the door wasn't locked, or if she jumped the counter in some way. I mean, she was really twisting that handle. Do I think that she would have put me in the washing machine? No, but I've never been in any kind of fight before, so I don't really know how to defend myself. I left the lobby to de-escalate the situation, but she wanted more, and I honestly hope that my boss does not refund her. And I also think that this may be the beginning of the end of my job as a night audit, at least at this location. I really need to work somewhere with a security guard and a functioning front door that locks. And while I know there's crazy people everywhere, a little bit of peace of mind at a new job really would go a long way. Honestly, if I was in that situation, just like the original poster, I would have probably called the police as well. This lady went from like 0 to 100 all of a sudden, and she came down into that lobby with a chip on her shoulder very clearly. So yeah, you did the right thing in my opinion. And I would have kicked this lady out as well. She literally said she wanted to stuff you in a washing machine. Like, what is going on right now? Talking to me or anybody else like that is not gonna fly on my watch. You gotta go. So hopefully you have some good luck when it comes to finding a new job, because based on what you just described, that sounds like a very scary situation to be stuck in, and hopefully you find something that's much better suited for what you want to do. My sister has invited a stranger to a family event without consulting me in the first place, and now I really don't know what to do. So last year, my family got into tapping, as well as maple syrup production, from the small sugar bush on the land I co-own with my sister, as well as our 2 younger siblings. My dad did most of it last year, with some help from the rest of my siblings. I was not able to take time off from work to help out, but this year I am in a different role at work, and I was really looking forward to participating. Over the last few months, my sister has also really gotten into online dating. She has met some people that she's decided to remain friends with. One of the men expressed interest in learning how to tap, so she invited him to participate. She asked her dad, who said it was okay, but she didn't ask me or our other siblings at all. I didn't even find out from her until a few days before that she invited this person, even though we've been talking about tapping and preparing for weeks now. We are also indigenous, and there are some ceremonial aspects and speeches that I have been working to learn, which again, she's known about for a couple of weeks now. And this is also we can collect our sap in reciprocity with the land. Now, my dad is not indigenous, but he is family, and he has been living in our community and on this land in particular for several years. So I am comfortable with him being present for part of this, but I am absolutely not comfortable with a non-indigenous stranger being there for that. On top of this, there are a couple of factors that are involved. For starters, when she got into online dating, my sister stopped hanging out with me altogether. Before that, we used to spend a couple of days a month together on hikes or thrifting. It hurt me a little, but I try to keep in mind that we are both busy, and she is excited by this new aspect that she's exploring, so it makes sense that she would focus a lot of her time and energy on that. That being said, I was really looking forward to spending this tapping time on the land with our family, all trying to reconnect once again. But now we will have to deal with some stranger being there. My sister has also had a strained relationship with our dad for a while. He can be a lot to handle because he talks a lot and is very into conspiracy theories and prepping, which spikes my sister's anxiety altogether. But he has a good heart and cares about us. Over the last few months, she's yelled at him a few times and spoken disrespectfully about him, as well as his tapping knowledge in front of the other members of our community. He doesn't know about the latter, but the former has hurt his feelings. I just feel like it's awful that she was talking down about my dad a few weeks ago in front of other community members who do their own tapping, but now that her friend wants to learn, she is happy to try and take advantage of his knowledge. What should I do? I don't know, it kind of seems like your sister has every right to be there with whoever she wants, and it seems like this only bothers you and literally nobody else in the situation, unless there's something that I'm missing. And sure, she didn't talk to you or anybody else about bringing this stranger over to learn about tapping, but she is a co-owner of the land. I mean, does she have to run everything by you before she does it? It sounds like a lot of the work has already been done without you because you haven't really been involved. But now that your sister's coming into the scene, basically right at the same time as you, is in itself clearly rubbing you the wrong way, and you feel like this guy should not be involved. But honestly, she has every right to invite this guy, in my opinion. So if you really did want to have some kind of conversation with your sister and explain to her that, hey, I want this to be a private moment with family, and then maybe he can come in and help out with tapping, you can certainly do that. But from my perspective, it honestly kind of comes off like you're being really controlling in this situation, and I seriously don't think that's fair for your sister or anybody else involved in this situation in the slightest. I don't seem to be a priority in my boyfriend's life, despite him saying that he cares about me a lot, and at this point, I don't know what to do. So I first want to say that I am really sad. I'm constantly crying because of this guy, because my self-worth has really come into question for me. I met this guy and we became fast friends. Friendship evolved into romance, and we became boyfriend and girlfriend. The first couple of days days was absolute heaven. He was the perfect gentleman, and he made me feel all tingly inside. Those feelings didn't last long though. After a while, he just began to straight up ignore me. He didn't talk to me at all, and the few times I tried to initiate conversation with him, he didn't respond for hours on end. I didn't really message him left and right. All I did was text him saying hi or wishing him a good morning. Some people were saying I was being too clingy with him, and honestly, I think they might be right. I think I got much too attached to him way too quickly. The few times he did respond to my messages, he always made up ridiculous excuses as to why he wasn't able to talk to me. His usual excuse was that he was hanging out with friends and was too tired to do anything afterwards. Now, if that was an every once in a while thing, that would be one thing, but that's something that happens nearly every time. I don't feel like I'm even a priority in his life, despite allegedly being his girlfriend. One day, I worked up the nerve to tell him how I felt, and again, he rained down a series of excuses. He said to me, "It's your hormones that are making you like that," as well as several other hurtful things that he said. I told him that I didn't feel like he really wanted to be with me, and he then said to me, "That's not true and you know it. I care about you. You know that, right?" Honestly, right now I just don't know. He barely talks to me as it is, and essentially acts like I don't exist like 95% of the time. I'm so close to breaking up with him, but I'm so hesitant. Why am I so hesitant about this? What should I do? It sounds like this is the early stages of your relationship, so I think there are a few ways you could take this. You could either try to make it work and figure this out some way, or you really could just break up. It seems like those are basically the options you have. And when it comes to trying to make it work, I think it just means you gotta sit down and talk with each other and maybe get to know each other a little bit better. And honestly, the fact that your boyfriend would say that your hormones are making you act this way is a giant red flag in my opinion. Like, I really don't know why he would say that to you, and that honestly comes off as really rude and incredibly disrespectful. And I don't think you're being too clingy or anything like that, but maybe he doesn't understand what you want out of this relationship. Maybe you really do need that text communication between the two of you, essentially so you can know that you're both still in contact and that he still likes you. Maybe that's just something that you need. So maybe communicating with him and explaining what you want out of this relationship really would make a big difference. So hopefully things work out for you, and honestly, even if it doesn't, I wouldn't be too surprised, because it definitely seems like this guy's just a little bit off when it comes to the relationship. And if that really is the case, then I seriously think you deserve much better than this. My entitled manager is refusing to pay me the full amount that I deserve, dancing around the law and claiming any kind of loophole they can find just to keep from paying me my full wage. And now, as a result of my complaining, they're trying to fire me as some kind of retaliation, and I now see myself in a legal battle that I honestly never expected. Here's what happened. So to start things off, I've been in the restaurant game for about 8 years now. My current restaurant is definitely on the shadier side when it comes to employment practices, from threatening to pull shifts if we don't get good Google reviews, to an extremely hostile and incompetent expo who will scream, curse at you, and slam things for nothing at all. They've also been getting fast and loose with the tip jar. I first raised the issue when they implemented a new chart for cleaning side work, in addition to normal side work, that clearly runs afoul of 80-20. The chart says to pick 3 things per shift to complete, and the tasks included cleaning every booth in the restaurant, moving every table and vacuuming, cleaning every outside table, etc. They also started this when we were understaffed on bussers, so I think it was an extra effort to save money on labor from having to hire new ones. Servers were also told to pick up the slack in cleaning the bathrooms. Again, wasn't making a huge deal about it, but hey, this could be a liability if someone makes a ruckus about it. My manager had never heard of 80-20 or any other limitations on what work servers can and cannot do for the tip credit. I showed my GM the law, and he said to email it to him and he'll send it to corporate. A few weeks go by and nothing happens. So I think to myself, okay, whatever, that's on me, I guess. To be fair, I really wasn't expecting it to go anywhere. However, the pot got a bit stirred when I got trained on the bar and did work a full week of training shifts where I couldn't earn any tips, and I saw that they claimed the tip credit for the entire week. Additionally, they scheduled me for an 8 a.m. cleaning shift on my day off, even though we open at 11 o'clock. I'd asked the managers on 3 separate occasions if I would at least get minimum wage for the 8 a.m. cleaning shift. They kept saying yes, but lo and behold, they never changed it, and my pay stub reflected the tip credit applied for all the hours worked. At this point, I drafted up a written request for the unpaid wages, detailing every opening shift I've worked, as well as the training week, the deep cleaning shift, and a couple of notable nights that I had to hang out and do side work despite not having tables for hours. I ultimately did cool off a little bit it, and I didn't turn it in. Fast forward a few more weeks to yesterday, and they said corporate finally answered the legal email and said no. As long as we get minimum wages for the week, that's all that's required, which is just flat out a lie. So now I'm angry that they're playing games. So I just say forget it. So I update the request for wages for all opening shifts that I've had, and I decide to go ahead and turn it in. Today, the very next day, as soon as I come in, they pull me into the office. They say they're writing me up for this list I made. I made a very detailed closing list on how to close for a new guy whose first night it was closing. I'd actually gone super detailed on how to time things and properly clean things. For example, nobody ever cleans the T-nozzles, and they get grimy and disgusting and have flies every morning. I mean, I literally made a schematic of the nozzle as well as how to take it apart. I'd also made some jokes, which for example, there's one girl I'm friends with, but tease her because she's notorious for skipping out on side work. Again, we're friends. I tease her and she laughs and takes it in all good faith. We literally got juice together today on break. I had shown the manager the list when I made it over a week ago, and she kept saying that she loved it. She needs to type that up. I better save it for her, and it's so true. Today, the same manager says she's writing me up because the jokes in the list are unacceptable, but I said that is BS. I wasn't born yesterday, and I was hoping the wage thing could be resolved easily. All I ever wanted was to be acknowledged, but now they're obviously going the retaliation route, and things are going to get messy. They just swore, no, this is unacceptable. This is unprofessional behavior. I asked the girl if she really felt that way about it, and she had not even heard anything about it. She literally said no, but she did find the jokes hilarious. And as I was typing this at the bar after work, a guy that the manager is trying to spend some quality time with was also here as well. I've always been cool with him. I gave him a brief summary of what happened, and he said he's not supposed to tell me this, but yeah, they're trying to get rid of me. My manager already asked him if he knows any bartenders because I'm on the way out. I submitted a complaint to the Department of Labor, but on Monday, I plan to call and update the complaint as soon as possible, with the obvious retaliation efforts in note. If they don't pay the wages within 15 days, I plan to pursue arbitration for the wages, as well as liquidated damages and any damages that result from retaliation. So I really hope it all goes well. Wow, this situation is honestly crazy. The fact that these people would act this way and basically try to throw you under the bus, all because you want to get paid fairly, is completely unacceptable. There is no good reason for that in the slightest. Like, think about it. You just want to get paid what you're worth. You want them to pay you for your time and your efforts. This is not a charity. You're not doing this for free. That is not how this works in the slightest. And the fact that they would try and take advantage of that and not pay you the full amount that you deserve is really toxic and seriously not okay. I don't care what these people are like. I don't care if they're rude or mean or nasty. When you start messing with someone else's money like that, you can expect some kind of legal battle. And it really sounds like the original poster is about to do that. So hopefully you not only lawyer up with this situation, but also that it turns out to be in your benefit, because these people sound awful. And I seriously think that these people need a wake-up call. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My manager fires me after I refused to work since I was not even on the schedule that week. And without my participation in this business, the entire place inevitably shuts down only 8 months later, and I've never been more satisfied in my life. Here's what happened. Many years ago, I worked at a place with lots of arcade games and pizza, similar to a Chuck E. Cheese. I was hired to do maintenance, repair, and setup for these arcade machines. There was already someone there doing this, but they were never allowed to work more than 40 hours a week, and the place was open 7 days a week, 9 hours a day. So that's a total of 63 hours a week, not including prep for opening and cleanup after closing. At the end of my first shift, I was told that I was also expected to help with the cleanup since everyone that worked close had to help with the cleanup as well, and all of my shifts were closing shifts. This meant that I had less time before my morning classes than I expected, especially when I started taking the job, but a few extra bucks was valuable to a starving college student. Fast forward about 2 months, and the new manager, who's fresh out of high school, gets his big boy boots on and starts making rules. The first rule is that a schedule with everyone's hours for the next week will be posted by Friday morning, and the second rule is that you must clock in before your posted shift start time, but not more than 5 minutes before your shift. And the third rule was that you must clock out at the end of your posted shift end time, no more than 5 minutes after. At the end of my first shift, after these rules were created, I clocked out and left everyone else to do the cleanup. To be clear, it's not like I was getting time and a half overtime or anything like that. All I expected expected was to be paid my normal rate, and they didn't even want to pay me that, so I clocked out and just left. At the beginning of my next shift, they were very angry with me. They expected me to clock out and then work over an hour for free every single shift. These were only 5-hour shifts too, mind you. But you know what? I refused. The next week, they posted a new schedule with my shift ending an hour later. Since everyone saw the list, they all got mad. I guess they were all just fine with wage theft until one person refused. The next week, everyone had an extra hour on their shifts, and at this point, his wage theft scheme had fallen apart. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and this new manager doesn't come in on Thursday. In fact, he doesn't come in until Monday. No schedule is posted, and once Monday afternoon rolls around, I go in to get my check and say to them, "See you next week." I'm told my shift started half an hour ago, and I say that I made plans since I wasn't on the schedule, and no schedule means I couldn't be on it. The manager then pointed to the schedule posted on the wall, printed just hours before, and this was after some of the shifts had already been started. I thanked him for posting next week's schedules early, and then I started to leave. Then I was threatened with termination, and I just kept walking. I came back a week later and talked with a daytime guy doing the same job. He said it was a bad week. Many machines were down, and he was refusing around like $100 in tokens because he was giving much of his time giving refunds, to the point where he didn't have enough uninterrupted time to make any repairs. He was also keeping a roll of masking tape with him just so he could tape over the coin slots as the machines failed. So this meant a lot more use on the remaining machines, which really started to show pretty quickly. I go to clock in and I was told that I had been fired, so I just smiled and I happily walked out. I spoke with a daytime guy a little while later, and apparently they never filled my position, mostly because people with mechanical and electrical knowledge willing to work minimum wage are kind of rare. Instead, he was getting 14 hours a week in time and a half overtime, with a base pay almost twice what I was getting. This extra expense came out of the department budget, which also paid for replacement parts, despite the fact that even before this, it was never enough to buy enough parts. And this from the department budget thing was from the same manager. He simply did not want normal payroll to go up. For a while, basically everyone was carrying around $20 in tokens just to give refunds, but the compensations were unacceptable to the manager, so now only the sales desk could issue refunds, which then meant ordering pizzas took forever, and many people just left angry rather than waiting for a refund. Most machines had tape over the token slots. Now, the backup at the sales desk didn't last long, as few people were coming and no one was booking parties anymore. Other than staff, it was basically empty. It didn't even smell like pizza anymore. With no customers, the daytime guy finally had time to make repairs, but didn't have parts to do most of the repairs. As far as I know, that manager stayed there until the place went under, which is about 8 months after I was fired for not working a shift that his own rules said I could not work. And honestly, I've never been more satisfied in my life. What a crazy circumstance. I mean, seriously, the original poster was basically holding that business together. Like, the fact that they were there doing their job meant that the rest of this place was able to keep the lights on. Not to mention this stupid manager. They literally fired the one person who could keep things going instead of just being reasonable and saying, okay, come in next week. I mean, if you want to start these dumb rules and try and have this weird enforcement for no reason, then you should expect somebody eventually to come back at you and show just a little bit of malicious compliance. And I also don't blame the original poster for putting their foot down and saying, no, I'm not going to have you steal my wage. I'm not going to clock out early just to then work another hour later. Like, that's just not going to happen. Sorry. Either pay me what I'm worth, or guess what? I'll find another job. So I really do think it's good for the original poster that they stood up for themselves and they decided to comply maliciously. Because you know what? This manager had it coming. And hopefully this reality check lasts this guy for the rest of his life. A creepy woman is trying to track down one of our guests at the hotel I work at, and the way she was acting and freaking out on us truly was incredibly creepy. Here's what happened. So for reference, this happened back in summer of 2022. I work the 3 to 11 shift at the hotel, so I deal with most, if not all, of the check-ins. This particular guest checked in at around 6 or 7 o'clock. For privacy reasons, I'll just call him Jack. That's not his real name. At check-in, everything went smoothly. Jack seemed like a nice, quiet man. Before he went down to his room, he said something that my coworker and I should have taken as a forewarning for the rest of the night. He asked us to not transfer any calls to his room. Later, a woman comes in asking if Jack is there. My coworker tells her that as per policy, we cannot tell her that information. She then thanks him and just leaves. Shortly after that, a phone call comes in, and this time from a slightly different sounding woman who claimed to be from Domino's Pizza, asking for a room number for Jack so she could bring up his pizza. She sounded different enough, and we were really busy as it is, that we didn't really think much of it, and so we just gave the number to her and went about checking other guests in. About 5 minutes later, we receive a call from Jack asking to be moved since we gave out his location. We realized then what just happened, we apologized, and we promptly moved him again. 15 minutes pass by, and we receive another call, this time from the woman. She asked to be transferred to Jack's room, and in the interest of rectifying the mistake that we had made, I tell her that no one under that name is staying here. She tells me that that's just absolute BS, as we had apparently transferred her there. This is when we figured out that the Domino's woman and this woman were in fact the same person. So I guess she's correct, obviously, but I'm not gonna tell her that. Instead, I say, I'm sorry, but I don't know what to tell you, ma'am. She then demands to speak to a manager. And the thing is, my managers are only there from 8 until 4 o'clock during the week. So there isn't even a current manager there for her to talk to. I tell her this and she gets angry. She started to cuss me out and threatened to call corporate on me. In response, I say to her, ma'am, if you want to, you can go right ahead and do that. Have a great night. And then I promptly hung up the phone on her. I would have thought that this would have been the end of it, but I was sorely mistaken. Not even 5 minutes later, I pick up the phone and she's there again, yelling at me and swearing at me and generally just being awful. And when she did that, I immediately hung up again. My coworker calls me to the back office and shows me the cameras. On them, we can clearly see the woman and an unknown man trying the exterior doors around the wing where Jack's room was. We have a can of pepper spray behind the desk, so we grab it and walk down to the halls. But by the time we got there, they were already gone. When we get back to the desk, we notice a silver SUV with a woman and the man in it lurking around in the front of the building. They did this for about an hour and finally left just as we were about to call the cops. And that was the last we ever saw of her that night, and I was honestly very creeped out by the entire experience. First and foremost, I want to say that the hotel is 100% at fault. They gave out this guy's location after he expressly said, hey, I don't want to have my information given out. I want to be privately in this hotel without anybody knowing that I'm here. But the people at the front literally violated that almost immediately. I mean, how inappropriate is that? This guy's trying to sleep in this hotel. He is clearly trying to lay low from the psychopath that is stalking him. And what does the front desk go ahead and do? Oh, they just give out his number to the random pizza person who is clearly just this lady trying to find him. Like, how awful at your job do you have to be to let that happen? Not even 15 minutes after this guy checked in. Completely inappropriate and so unacceptable in my opinion. If I was the guy that had this happen to them, I would have stormed right down to the front desk and demanded a refund, because I wouldn't want to stay at a hotel that's going to compromise my safety. Because look at the cameras, look at all that was going on. These people clearly had ulterior motives, and you probably put this guy in a lot of danger. So hopefully if you still do work in the hotel business, maybe be just a little bit more mindful of what people want out of their experience, because you straight up jeopardized this guy's privacy, and that in my opinion is completely unacceptable. My entitled sister-in-law says some awful things about me behind my back, creating horrible rumors and awful hearsay, all after I gave her and her husband the opportunity to live in my apartment while they tried to find someplace new. But after a while, I simply had had enough, and I requested that they leave sooner than later. Here's what happened. So I'm a 29-year-old female, and I have two sons, one age 9 and one age 10, whose dad passed away 4 years ago. I have my own 2-bedroom place that I rent that I've lived in for about 5 years now. And while it is only a 2-bedroom unit, it is still pretty big. 2 bedrooms upstairs and a bathroom with a shower, toilet, and bathtub, and a living area room that is closed off and has its own door. Then a kitchen and dining area, and then also another bathroom downstairs attached to the laundry room, which only has a toilet and a sink. And all of this information is just context because it's relevant to help understand the rest of the story. So the year my son's father passed away, about 4 years ago in September, is when he passed, and the funeral was early October. So the next month in early November, my brother and sister-in-law found themselves homeless. They had only one child at the time, which is my sister-in-law's child from a previous relationship. He's about a year old, and my brother had stepped up because his own dad wasn't in the picture. So I offer them my son's room for a few weeks until they can get on their feet and get on their way, which I didn't mind, and also my sons were okay with it. They had to pay me rent and board of $300 for a fortnight. We all thought it was reasonable, as my sister-in-law gets paid nearly $2,000 a fortnight in government benefits. So as time goes on, I realized that my sister-in-law is a very, very lazy person and mother. I do not like mother shaming one bit, But this was different. She was leaving dirty, used diapers everywhere. In the bathroom, in the living room, anywhere she changed the child basically. No matter how many times I asked her to please remember to put the diapers in the bin straight away please, it would continuously happen. I also helped with her child like babysitting and feeding as well, because every evening at dinner time, she would complain of being too tired or sick to leave the room, so I would feed him for her. I felt like she was taking advantage of my kindness because it got to the point where I was doing everything for her infant child that she should have been doing herself. She also smokes the herb, if you know what I mean, every single day, and it's like she just wanted to lay around in the room. I spoke to my brother numerous times about how I felt, and he would speak to her, but she would never change. He worked Monday through Friday, and I swear that she hated that. She would complain to him that she doesn't want him to work because she missed him in the day, and that she gets enough benefits that he doesn't need to work. So one day I found out from another family member that my sister-in-law was running me down behind my back, complaining that I'm nasty to her when my brother is at work during the day. Now, I have a condition, and I'm on disability because of it, so I don't work, but I also study online, and I'm on site on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Also, not to mention that I take care of her child for her on days when I am home. I was never nasty to her because that's just not the kind of person that I am. Also, me and my sons were also still grieving. I eventually got fed up and said that they had to find other arrangements by next week. My brother was fine with that, but guess what? She wasn't. It was coming up to Christmas, and she said she can't leave because Christmas is in a few weeks and her kid deserves a proper Christmas. I explained that my sons and I needed our space back and that I was emotionally and physically drained from the grief and also the stress of having to look after her baby for her. And I was cleaning up for her as well all the time, all while she just sits around and does nothing. And she was trying to use this time to look for and apply for other rentals. She didn't like that and suggested that I turn my lounge room into a third bedroom. That way, so my sons could get their own room back. And she was using that against me because they were bunking in my bedroom with me at the time. I said I couldn't believe she had the audacity to even suggest that, especially after all the awful things she said to me behind my back to other family members. We then eventually got into a massive argument after that. She then said that she was pregnant and called me evil for telling her she had to find somewhere else to stay. But you know what? I really did not believe her, to be completely honest with you. They ended up leaving a few days later. My brother didn't want me and my boys to have to feel like garbage just because of the lies that my sister-in-law was making up. He didn't leave my sister-in-law because he felt obligated to be there, mostly because of her claiming to be pregnant. Plus, he was attached to her little boy and saw him as his own. Thankfully, he did not believe her lies about me because he knows that I'm not like that. Plus, he said that he loved her, so I respected that. But I told him that I honestly think that she's a narcissist. Yeah, this lady sounds absolutely obnoxious, and I would also label her as a narcissist. She treated your home like some kind of lounge, and she didn't do anything. She spent her entire time being there just sitting around, not looking for another place to live, and basically taking advantage of your kindness. Because honestly, in her eyes, why should she leave? You get to take care of her kids, she's got basically a free place to stay. This is all good in her eyes, which honestly is unacceptable, and it's so irresponsible it's not even funny. And I'm honestly blown away that this guy would even stick around with this lady. She's clearly taking advantage of him, and she's probably lying about being pregnant. I really would not put it past her. So regardless of what happens, I'm just glad that this lady doesn't live with you anymore. She does not sound like a good person, and she was clearly taking advantage of your kindness. And hopefully moving forward in the future, you don't have to deal with her entitled behavior anymore. An entitled Karen tries to get me fired, all because she hit me with her electric scooter at Walmart, falsely claiming that I was the reason she crashed. Things escalated so much that she even showed up to our store with a lawyer next to her. Here's what happened. So when I was in college, I used to work at Walmart, initially as a courtesy clerk. The town I lived in easily exceeded 100 degrees Fahrenheit during the summer months. By state law, the store had to give us a 5-minute break inside just to cool down after 2 rounds of collecting carts and provide us with beverages so that we can stay hydrated. The beverage they usually gave us was Gatorade, and this will be relevant to the story. After a couple of hours, it was time for me to take my first official 15-minute break. I filled a cup of Gatorade and proceeded to make my way to the break room. There was a bit of a blind spot walking past the registers, so I stopped and looked both ways down the aisle to make sure I wouldn't accidentally bump into anyone. The closest person to me was one of our regular shoppers, an older lady who is the entitled Karen of this story. This entitled Karen has amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or Lou Gehrig's disease, the same condition that Stephen Hawking had. Because of this, she had to use an electric wheelchair and lived at a local assisted living center. Due to her condition, there were 2 rules she had to follow whenever she shopped at the store in order to prevent accidental collisions with people. For starters, she must always be accompanied by an employee from the assisted living center whenever she shopped there. And also, she had to keep the wheelchair speed to one of the lowest settings. Knowing these rules and seeing how far down the aisle she was, I knew I could get across quick enough before she got anywhere near me. After taking a step or 2 down into the aisle, I immediately noticed 2 things. For starters, she did not have anyone with her from the assisted living center. And also, she was driving the wheelchair much faster than she was supposed to. She was on a collision course with me, so instinctively I tried to jump back out of the way to avoid getting hit. But unfortunately, it was way too late. She hits me while I was in the air. I fell to the ground and I spilled my Gatorade all over the wheelchair. The lady loses control of the chair and starts spinning around in circles. She's flailing her arms and screaming with what limited mobility she had, and nearly hit me a second time, but I managed to roll out of the way. I knew I had to try and stop her before she hit someone else, so I grabbed the handlebar on the back of the wheelchair, hoping I could at least slow her down. This didn't work, and instead, she dragged me around in circles in the middle of the aisle. Several coworkers and shoppers quickly rushed in and stopped the lady, who seemed to be okay, just a little bit startled. But when I tried to stand up, 2 male shoppers held me down. One of them leaned over me and said, "You're gonna be alright, sir. Everything's gonna be fine." He turned his head and started yelling, "I need a first aid kit." I could hear a lady in the background also scream that somebody needed to call 911. So I'm just laying there and I'm wondering what on earth happened to me. Sure, I was going to have a nice bruise on my hip from when I hit the floor, but besides that, I felt fine. I quickly discovered why the customers were panicking. The flavor of the Gatorade that we had that day was the fruit punch one. Some of it splashed on my face when the lady hit me. The customers who witnessed the incident thought I busted my head open when I hit the ground. I had to assure them that this was nothing, it was just Gatorade, and that I was fine. A member of management eventually showed up to document the entire incident. After I gave him my statement, I was finally able to take my break. I was even given an extra 5 to 10 minutes so I could clean up and recuperate from what had just happened. And this is where I thought the story would end, but honestly, I was completely wrong. A couple of weeks later, I was called back to the manager's office, the store manager, who will call Kate, that's not her real name, as well as several assistant managers, all of them sitting there waiting for me. Kate told me to take a seat and asked if I remember the incident from a few weeks ago with the handicapped lady in the electric chair and the Gatorade. I just chuckled and said, "How could I forget?" Kate said, "Well, that lady was just in my office and she had a lawyer with her. She wanted to sue the store, claiming that she suffered mental distress from that incident, and as part of her lawsuit, she wanted your employment with the company terminated, claiming that you were the one responsible for the collision." And when Kate said that to me, I was absolutely speechless. I could not believe what I was hearing. But Kate quickly put my mind at ease. She said, "Don't worry, you're not in any trouble." We showed the lady and her lawyer the security footage from the incident, and I reminded her of the rules that she knew she had to follow whenever she shopped at the store, just so we could prevent any collisions from happening. But she decided to break them anyways, and that she should consider herself lucky that she hit a store employee who only suffered a minor injury, because if she had hit another customer and that customer suffered a serious injury, she would be held responsible for the collision and would have had a major lawsuit on her hands. The assisted living center would also be at fault for somehow allowing her to leave the center on her own without their notice. But if she still wanted to sue, she can try, but she won't win. This entitled Karen's lawyer knew they didn't have a snowball chance in heck of winning this one in the slightest, so the 2 of them just left. Kate said that since I was the employee involved in this incident, she thought I would want to know what this entitled Karen attempted to do, stating that I would get a kick out of it. I will admit, it does add a nice punchline to the story, but I truly wish I could have been there in the manager's office to watch this encounter with the entitled Karen, as well as the rest of the store's managers. It must have been nice to watch her face drop when she realized she absolutely did not have a case and she would not be winning this fight. Wow, that entitled Karen is an absolute scumbag. I mean, how low do you have to be to not only try and throw the employee under the bus, who was trying to save you from crashing into people, by the way, but also to then demand that they get fired because of your stupid mistake? Like, they literally did nothing wrong. They didn't do anything to you. They were only trying to help you not crash into to other people, and if anything, the original poster probably has some kind of grounds to try and take them to civil court. I mean, they really should be lucky that the original poster is not pursuing this legally. So good for the manager for actually being on their side and not allowing this entitled Karen to basically walk all over the original poster, because this really could have gone a lot differently. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Today, I messed up by hiring a house cleaner to help me get my awful apartment in order. But instead of cleaning the apartment like we hired her to do, she instead takes a private video of the apartment just to have for her own personal record. And now, as a result, we are demanding a refund. Here's what happened. So my apartment is an absolute train wreck. There's a million reasons why we fall behind on housework, but my top 5 are as follows. For starters, I'm a full-time nursing student in my last semester, and I'm currently working 24 to 36 hours a week. My significant other is a full-time teacher, and we both have ADHD and depression, and no one picks up after themselves. My mom is also a chronically messy person, just like myself and my significant other, and we are trying to do better, but we are struggling. So my mom had someone come in and help her get her apartment cleaned, and then gifted us a visit from a different house cleaner to help us out. The house cleaner she already paid to visit us is the daughter of someone my mom and I both used to work with. So I was a bit reluctant to have someone that I know be aware of the state of our apartment, but she was trying to get her cleaning service started, and my mom wanted to help her out. So I get it scheduled with this cleaner, but the night before she's supposed to come in, I had been studying for a big exam, and I was trying to crawl out of my depressive episode and just function. So I did not have the chance to actually pre-clean the apartment before she came over. I texted her that night asking to reschedule for a time when I had a better chance to pre-clean, explaining that I had an exam I desperately needed to study for, and I had not been able to pre-clean in the slightest. She adamantly assures me that it's fine, not to worry about it, to focus on my exam and let her handle the mess, and I reluctantly agreed. Wednesday, she texts me that she's running late and won't be there before I leave for school. We make arrangements for her to let herself in, and I don't hear anything else until the afternoon when I turn my phone back on after my exam. And when I do, I have a text message that just says, "Hey, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to reschedule." So I respond by saying, "That's okay, is something wrong?" She says the mess is more than she was expecting and that she can come back another time after I've had a chance to pre-clean like I said. It wasn't a wasted trip anyways, because she had to deliver something to my mom. Friday, when I talk to my mom again, I tell her about the cleaning lady and how she had to reschedule because the mess was way too much. So we are going to be working on cleaning this week, all while we are on spring break. My mom texted the cleaning lady, much to my chagrin, because she was frustrated that she hadn't been notified as the customer that services were not actually rendered. And that's when the cleaning lady tells my mom that it was just way too much. And she's only telling her this mother to mother, that if her daughter was living like we are, she would want to know and she would be concerned. Then the cleaning lady offers to send my mom the video she took of my apartment to show her what she's talking about. And she's again only doing this mother to mother out of concern. My mom and I were both very upset that the video was taken, and even more so that she offered to send it to my mom. My mom told her basically that she's aware of the condition and that we need help, and that's why she hired a house cleaner to help us. My mom is asking for a refund because we both feel absolutely betrayed, and we are not comfortable with this cleaning lady coming back later. The cleaning lady basically said she will have to wait 2 weeks because she used it to pay rent, which is fine, whatever, and I totally understand that, but honestly, I don't think we'll ever bring that lady back to our apartment ever again. That is seriously the worst thing that could have possibly happened. What an absolute betrayal of trust. You bring this person in to try and clean up your apartment since you have not had the chance to do it yourself. And not only does she not do it because it's too overwhelming, but she also takes a video of your house without your knowledge. Like, that wasn't listed in the text message. Like, she didn't explain that she violated your privacy and took a video of everything that was going on in your apartment. Like, that is not okay in the slightest. And the fact that she was trying to send this over to the mom as some kind of excuse is, in my opinion, just that. It's a horrible excuse. She probably didn't even take that video to show it to the mom, but probably took it to show it to her friends and probably show it to other people and be like, wow, you know the original poster? Look how messy their house is. So personally, I don't blame you for looking for a refund and telling this cleaning lady to simply take a hike, because what she did is unbelievably disrespectful, and I seriously don't see her ever succeeding in the cleaning business if this is how she's gonna treat her clients. My coworkers are spreading a rumor that I'm spending quality time time with one of my coworkers and have taken it upon themselves to tell my boyfriend this fake rumor as well. And now my relationship looks like it might be falling apart and I seriously don't know what to do. So my boyfriend and I are on terrible terms right now and I just don't know what to do. I have never been in a situation like this and I'm kind of freaking out. So to back up, I work in a restaurant with a bar and I'm also in college. Our relationship is very good and healthy and I pretty much live with him. He is very sweet, funny, intelligent, and very hot. We have been together for 2 years with no major problems. We have had small problems that were easily solvable, but that's about it. Now there is a guy at work who's about 29 years old that has been there for about 5 months now. There is a group of friends I have at work who I hang out with sometimes after work. He is included in this group now, and usually he goes with us whenever we do something. He likes to flirt and has hit on me several times, and I shut it down when he takes it too far. When we are at friends' houses, he always wants to talk to me. He wants to sit next to me, touch me in a joking way, except when my boyfriend is there, of course. Someone gave him my number, or he may have gotten it from work somehow, and now he texts me every once in a while. Unless he asks me a specific question about something, I just ignore him. It is annoying sometimes, but it's not frequent. I have talked to my boyfriend about this, and he will get upset about it sometimes, but this guy never acts like this when my boyfriend is actually around. He has offered to talk to him, but I told him not to do it, that I could handle it, and it would just hurt me at work. He hadn't done anything. He just didn't like him. A few nights ago at work, I had a break, so I went into the walk-in just to vape. He followed me and started talking to me while in there. He was sitting directly across from me. A guy we work with walked in, and he had his hand on my leg. I didn't think much of this at the time because it wasn't that unusual. He would do something like this, and I would tell him to stop. He would laugh about it and then apologize. This has now turned into a huge rumor at work that we are apparently spending quality time together. Someone told my boyfriend about this, but this whole thing's been twisted into this guy being all over me or making out. Last night when I got home, he accused me of cheating on him, as well as spending quality time with this guy, and we got into a huge fight. I told him what actually happened and have been trying to convince him that nothing is going on, but he doesn't know what to believe right now, and I can't really blame him really, when it's a rumor that he was told directly. I gave him my phone and I blocked this guy completely. I have offered to quit my job, but he hasn't told me one way or the other. But now I don't want to go back to that place at all. My boyfriend texted him and later they got into a screaming match. He told my boyfriend that he could have spent quality time with me anytime he wanted, and I guess I'm lucky he didn't lie and say that we were since they were fighting. This is my first real relationship, and I love my boyfriend. I am scared of losing him over this, or our relationship being permanently damaged. I don't know what else to do to convince him or how to fix this in the first place. What should I do? Personally, if I was in your situation and some guy was following me into the walk-in just to touch my leg, not to mention all the other instances where this guy has touched you inappropriately, but I would be going to HR or management and being like, hey, this is what's going on. This guy is touching me inappropriately and you need to do something about this. Because that, first and foremost, is unacceptable, and that should have been addressed a long time ago. I don't care if he's part of your friend group. I don't care if you have any kind of camaraderie with him or anything along those lines. The second this guy starts touching you without your permission is the second that something needs to be done about that. And as for your supposed friends at this workplace, all of them are so toxic for spreading that rumor. Instead of going to you directly and being like, hey, what's going on? Like the fact they would perpetuate this and then go to your boyfriend just to be like, this is what's going on, is unbelievable to me. They were never your friend in the first place, and this is clearly some kind of plan to try and ruin your relationship. So hopefully you're able to do something about this guy at work, while also trying to maintain your relationship with your boyfriend, because the actions that are being taken against you, as well as these false rumors that are being spread around by your coworkers, absolutely should have consequences. Today, I messed up by basically crossing a boundary with my friend that has made him very standoffish and basically ruined our friendship, and I seriously don't know what to do. So I'm a 31-year-old female, and about a year ago, I became friends with a guy from work. Let's call him Jake. That's not his real name. We started chatting at a company party, we got along, and hung out outside of work a few times. He was going through some stuff at the time. He recently got dumped and was about to graduate from college and was trying to figure out what to do for the rest of his life. Many of these struggles resonated with my 20-something-old self, and it felt good to be able to impact some wisdom. On the other hand, he was confident and assertive, and I felt perhaps in that sense, I could learn a little from him. I was also just happy that someone cool wanted to hang out with me. I am a pretty anxious person, and I don't have a vibrant social life. Now, Jake was cute in a way that was hard for me to ignore, but he was never a viable partner for me. The thought was there at first, but it dissipated once he started to come to me for relationship advice regarding other women. I would never pursue someone who was not interested in me. There was also the age difference, and the fact that we are in different places in our lives. While I was still a little attracted to him, I was firmly settled on not acting on it and not letting it show. I'm not normally very feminine, but I think I acted even more boyish around him just so that it was crystal clear that no flirting was happening. At one point, Jake invited me to his birthday party. I didn't want to disappoint a friend on his birthday, so I went. But I get anxious in social groups, especially if there are people I don't know, so I drank a lot to make myself at ease. After the party, Jake became more absent, saying that he had to study, which made sense. He agreed to meet up when we had more time, but he didn't follow up. And as bad as I am at reading social cues, I felt that he might not be very interested in seeing me, so I just kind of backed off. I felt a little sad about it though, because I valued him as a friend, and I didn't understand what made him change his mind about me. So about 6 months later, I messaged him, and after we caught up, I asked him directly if there was a reason he had blown me off, to which he replied that at the party, I was all over him, and I had crossed his boundaries when he told me to stop. He said that he liked me, but not in a romantic way, and that was way too much for him to deal with. I was flabbergasted, apologized profusely, and asked about details, convinced that this was something that had been erased from my memory. After a few days of mulling it over, I did recall a situation like this, but I remembered it a little bit differently. In my drunken mind, I was just showing friendly affection. I did something like rest my head on his shoulder, and when he pulled away and said he didn't want to be touched, I almost took it as a joke and purposefully touched his arm, to which he reacted very nervously, so I cut it off. This is an awful thing I do when I'm under the influence. I think it's funny to do something someone says that they dislike just to see how they react. One time, a guy was going off about how he loved his shoes and hated it when someone stepped on them, and I thought it would be funny to do exactly that. He screamed at me, I apologized instantly, while also apologizing again later on when I sobered up, and it didn't ruin our friendship, but I admit that it was stupid. It was a childish thing to do, and I don't know why on earth I did that. Honestly though, I don't think I'm gonna do that ever again after this. Anyways, I trust his account better than my memory. If I had just been friendly, I wouldn't have made him so uncomfortable, and let's face it, I do have a history of becoming scandalous when I drink. In the past, I have woken up next to people with little to no recollection of the events, and had to explain to them that this wasn't in fact the beginning of our future together. I had instead just gotten wasted. I don't do that anymore. I barely even go out anymore, but I am what I am, and what I apparently am is a professional creep that bothers young men. I do wish he had told me straight up, instead of pretending everything was okay for months, but I understand that it was well within his rights. Maybe we could have stayed friends, but maybe what I did was unforgivable. I have a friend who crossed my physical boundaries once, and it changed how I felt about him altogether, but I didn't cut him off. He apologized, and I knew he understood it was not an okay thing to do to anyone. We survived it in general, but we had known each other for years by that point. Maybe that friendship had a more solid foundation to begin with. This whole thing messed me up pretty badly. I told one friend who said that he had seen me under the influence and flirty in the past, and it wasn't something that would traumatize anyone. He said it was normal for me to feel embarrassed, but it wasn't that big of a deal. It's been a few months, and it keeps popping up in my head. I feel so ashamed, and my self-esteem is at an all-time low. I guess I'm also just a little concerned about if this gets out. Although we don't really know a lot of the same people, I would maybe like to talk it through with him, but I don't think he's interested in talking, and I want to respect his wishes. I do realize that I am at fault here, and my sense of self-worth is none of his concern. I don't know how to process this by myself though. How do I recover from this? Do I even deserve to recover from this? What should I do? It really sounds like you might want to take some steps to stop drinking altogether, because what you've described is really scary. I mean, you didn't even remember this interaction in that way, and in the past, you've also woken up next to people that you literally don't know. Like, that is really dangerous behavior. If Jake was a different person with ulterior motives, he easily could have taken advantage of your inebriated state, and that in and of itself could have been awful. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. You really are at fault in this situation. You crossed a serious boundary on his end, and there's really no reason for him to have to hear about your self-worth issues. So hopefully you're able to find help for that kind of situation, while also finding some kind of sobriety in your life, because what you described is really scary, and this very easily could have gone in a different direction if you were not careful. My entitled teacher accuses me of plagiarizing my project, and as a result, she forces me to provide evidence that I didn't cheat, forcing me to go to extreme measures just to prove my innocence. Here's what happened. So I had a pretty lousy teacher for 8th grade social studies. To give you an idea of this, there was a unit where she asked the class if anyone seriously thought that they would want to be the president someday and would explain that something like that needs to be your calling. Someone asked her if teaching was her calling, and after pausing, she answered honestly and said no. Now onto the story at question. One of the bigger projects that we had was called News Summary or something like that. The point was simple: to encourage us to be aware of current events. We were required to read, watch, or listen to the news and write 3-sentence summaries. No citations or sources needed. She just wanted to see that we were informed about things in the news. This was a piece of cake. I wrote my summaries, turned them in, and thought nothing more of it. I still thought nothing of it a couple of days later when she spent the entire class ranting about ethics and plagiarism. You know how you feel when someone calls a meeting to admonish the entire group for something that someone did wrong? That why am I stuck listening to this garbage feeling? That was me. At one point, she asked everyone to close their eyes and said to us, "Raise your hand if you'd like another shot at the project." So now imagine my shock when, at the end of class, she asked me to stay behind. She says to me, "You've always been one of my better students. I am really surprised that you didn't speak up in class today." I looked at her and I said, "Speak up about what?" She said, "When I asked for hands." So at this point, I'm really confused and I don't know what to say. So after a long pause, she lays it out for me. She apparently knows that all my summaries were plagiarized because according to her, no 8th grader writes like they're writing for a newspaper. But she can't prove it because she doesn't know if I just listened to the newscast and wrote down what they said or not. And this was also back before everything was online, mind you. I didn't know how to respond and I had to get to my next class. So I left quite confused and unsure what this accusation would mean. Well, when I got home from school that day, my mom was quick to tell me that she had had an interesting phone call with my teacher. And here's the good news. Not only was my mom always supportive of me as a child, she literally watched me doing this project. And she still had all the source material. Newspapers that were a few weeks old, so they weren't in the pile of things that the teacher would have easily found at work. She probably could have found the papers at the library, but again, this is someone who admitted to the class at one point that teaching wasn't really her calling. The plan my mom had worked out with the teacher during this phone call was that if I could produce proof that I wasn't plagiarizing, we would forget this entire thing ever happened. My mom was so livid during this phone call that she also didn't really think to say that we have the papers at home and we'll bring them in tomorrow. The teacher said I had till the end of the week to provide proof, which is good because the scheme that finally started hatching in my head couldn't be put in place overnight. See, the thing about our local paper is that the letters to the editor page would print nearly anything, as long as it wasn't an absolute crazy rant from someone who sounded like they belonged in an institution. So after racking my brain, I wrote a letter that complied with the length limit, which I think was about 150 characters. The basic summary of it was that I was noticing more and more that I had a number of friends who were showing real aptitude for different things at school as they entered their teenage years, be it the arts like music and writing or athletics or philosophy, but teachers kept downplaying their aptitudes as well as their interests in order to push the notion that the only thing that mattered was being able to pass your middle school exams. It was, as I wrote, discouraging to see my friends' talents and interests being so casually dismissed. Admittedly, I took some liberties here and there, as most of my friends were actually just doing what they needed to pass with good grades. But I had a point to make. 3 days later, I handed in my stack of source material after class. Attached last in the pile was my letter with my name, age, and town printed beneath it, published in the newspaper. In hindsight, I wish I would have included a post-it note just to speak more directly to my point. But there was no mistaking the message from that note. It's not hard for an 8th grader to write like they're writing for the newspaper. I stayed to make sure she read all of the clippings, and after an awkward pause, I was told I could go to my next class. She then quietly replaced my grade of a 0 with an A. The rest of the school year was perfectly boring, and she continued to teach all the way up until she could afford to retire. I did hear later on, however, that she stopped doing the news summary project, and I would like to think that I played a little bit of a role in her canceling that stupid project. Good for the original poster for standing their ground. There is literally nothing more terrifying in my mind than being a student of some degree and getting accused of plagiarism. Like, that is a serious offense, and that is seriously scary. So good for you and your mom for basically backing up your story and showing that yes, I did have my sources available and I also did not plagiarize this. It is easy to get in the newspaper and you proved it to her all in one go. And that clearly was more than enough evidence to shut her up for good, as well as to eventually cancel that project altogether. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My boyfriend ruins the mood all the time by accusing me of acting weird over and over again, when in reality, he's the one with some mental health issues that he refuses to get help for. And at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. So my boyfriend and I have been together for 7.5 years, and we've been living together for 3. Lately, we have been going through an extremely rough patch. There have been many exhausting nights of conversations that just go in circles. There have been some hurtful things said on both sides. Moral of the story is his mental health just isn't right. He is working in a prison as a psych assistant, and I know that's part of what has been taking a toll on him. I have been there for him in every way that I can. I will make sure he comes home to a clean apartment because I know messes just stress him out even more. I will write him encouraging notes, reminding him what I love about him, as well as telling him to have a great day, and the list goes on. I always listen to him for hours, even if I'm not particularly interested in what it is that he's talking about. I am even literally going to heavy metal concerts with him because he wanted me to come along, even though I don't like that kind of music, but I just wanted to spend time with him. I gave him all the space he wanted because that's what he said that he needed. I did not push him, and I let him come to me. I put my feelings on the back burner because he wanted to take a break to figure himself out. He went back and forth on the break thing for like 5 or 6 weeks. 1 week saying, yes, let's do it, spend 1 or 2 nights away, then come right back. And a few days later, announce we really need to go back on a break for real. It was a nightmare, and it was such a confusing time for me. But I did it because I know his mental health hasn't been the best, and I was hoping his space away would help him and then help us. The worst part is he refuses to go to therapy. It's kind of ironic given he is in the mental health field and plans to pursue his PhD. It's frustrating because I had terrible mental health issues all my life, and when I started going to a good therapist and working on myself, I started feeling better. And just as I started feeling better is when he started feeling bad, which has hindered my progress in a way. I am proud of myself because I have really learned to cope and I feel stronger, but it just sucks because my relationship is one aspect that I'm just not happy with, and he really isn't doing anything to help himself either, so I feel helpless. He comes home with an attitude pretty much every night. I'm always so eager to see him, and then boom, he is in a terrible mood. It's just getting tiring, and I feel guilty saying this because I too went through an awful mental health phase. The difference is I didn't want to shut him out. I wanted to be around him. Fast forward, and the past couple of weeks have been okay. I don't know if I would describe it as being better because there are moments where things do feel better, but then we get into a fight again, and it's really discouraging. It just feels like something is missing emotionally, and I can't put my finger on it. I'm just so confused right now. It's like there's an emotional need I have, but I don't know what it is. He isn't as caring anymore, which I understand because he is going through something and needs to focus on bettering himself. I guess I want him to be nicer and sweeter to me, as well as want to be around me and be more concerned with me. He seems short. There's not much effort into him making me feel really loved. For a while, I did have to really ask over and over again for him to spend time with me, but it honestly started to feel forced. So I just gave up, and I literally just let him have all the space that he wanted. Last night, he did suggest that we should go and eat and then go play pool, which I was excited about. We get to dinner and I'm in a good mood, talking about random things, no indication that there's anything wrong. Then he says to me, I'm feeling down, all of a sudden out of nowhere, almost randomly. So I'm like, okay, what's wrong? And he didn't want to talk about it or elaborate. So of course that kind of put a damper on the mood in general, but I continued in a decent mood because we have a habit of making small things that ruin our entire night together. Well, then he kept randomly saying, you're acting weird. And I'm honestly telling you right now that I really was not acting weird. I kept going on with my energy and said, no, I'm not. I'm just sitting here talking. But then he said it a few more times and would ask what's wrong. I don't know why, but nothing annoys me more than getting accused over and over again of acting weird when I am literally not. It drives me crazy. I always tell him when there's an issue with me. So I started getting irritated and I told him that he was projecting. He was the one who said he was down out of nowhere in the middle of a random conversation and then started accusing me of acting weird. We were literally just talking about our workouts that we did and talking about workout in general when he said that all of a sudden out of nowhere. I had an upbeat energy. He got a little little bit into an argument after that. What makes me upset is that he acts so surprised when I finally get irritated and have an attitude back. I can't defend myself or have any feelings because then I'm seen as aggressive and I'm the one who's going to be at fault all of the sudden. I may have overreacted because I got triggered on the third time he accused me of acting weird. It wasn't terrible, I just got frustrated and basically said he was projecting. We did recover and had a good time surprisingly. I say that because the last few times that we've gone out to eat, the night ended terribly with us fighting or in bad moods overall, but I just have a terrible taste in my mouth this morning and I feel guilty because we did actually have a good time. So it really makes me feel like I don't know what I'm doing. There's so much wrong and I feel like my needs are not being met and I'm so tired of having a terrible time almost every time that we hang out. I'm not perfect in any way, shape, or form. I have my issues too, but I don't even know how to talk to him at this point because it's all just so confusing. And many times that I do express a need, the response is always, well, I do this and I do that. And I'm not discrediting that. I just don't feel heard in the slightest. I feel like I'm starting to have a lot of resentment building up. And at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Honestly, it sounds like your boyfriend is an emotional vampire. And that's someone who is just constantly draining to be around. They completely destroy the mood by saying stuff like, oh, I'm just feeling down all of a sudden. Or obviously trying to instigate arguments when you're both clearly just trying to have a good time. And by the way, that's what he did when you guys went out to eat. He was clearly trying to pick a fight because either he's bored or he's just being so toxic that he just doesn't even see what he's doing. And while you can't force him to go get help and find some kind of solutions to his problems, you can make it very clear that the way he's acting is completely inappropriate. Because based on what you've described, it really sounds like you're unhappy. And I honestly think you deserve to be happy in your relationship, regardless of what your partner may or may not be going through. My boyfriend feels that I'm stringing him along, all because I want to go traveling overseas while I'm young. And now we're at a crossroads in our relationship, and I seriously don't know what to do. So my boyfriend and I have been together for a year, and everything has been going well until I brought up the idea of going traveling for 4 to 6 months. I'm a person that loves to travel and explore, and he knew that when we got together, but it has never been a problem until now. I brought it up in conversation after some close work colleagues moved to Australia for a few months, and I just said how I would love to do that too. At first, it was just a crazy idea, but the more I thought about it, the more it became a realistic idea. I asked him if he would like to go traveling with me, and he said no. I asked him if he wanted to try long distance while I was traveling around, and he also said no. I then asked him if he would like to come out and visit me while I was traveling, and he also said no. I said to him that he was leaving me no other option than for us to go on a break while I'm away and revisit the relationship when I'm back. The other option is for us to split up altogether or for me to not go traveling at all. I had talked to my close friends about the idea of going traveling, and 2 of them are 100% in, but I would have to wait until they finish university in 3 years' time. We got into a big fight about it where he told me he feels like I'm stringing him along until I go traveling and that we will break up. I feel like I've given him every option available so that we can still stay together and I can still travel, but he's not happy with any suggestion that I've made. A couple of weeks later, he tells me that he wants an open relationship so that he can see other girls to get over me quicker when I inevitably break up with him to go traveling. I hesitantly agreed after he pinky promised me that it wasn't a test and that this is what he really wanted. In fact, he set up dating profiles for both of us. Within 2 days, I had 23 matches and was talking to a few guys, and he had none. He saw me texting one of the guys and accused me of cheating, and that in reality, it all really was a test, just to see if I really loved him. I brought up that he promised that it wasn't a test, and the only reason I agreed to it was to make him happy, just to try and save us in the long run. All of this has happened because I want to go traveling and live my life to the fullest. I love this man and truly believe I could marry him one day, so I don't want to ruin our relationship. However, it is important to me that I can have freedom to go traveling while I'm young, so I don't have any regrets later in life. What should I do? I think I've noticed a theme in some of these posts. The person in question says all of these awful, terrible things that their significant other has done, and then in the last paragraph, they try to convince themselves that maybe it's not that bad. Well, you know what? It is that bad. So I can confidently say that your boyfriend has a bunch of red flags. For starters, in my opinion, anytime someone says, oh, let's have an open relationship, that in my opinion is a massive red flag. That not only shows me that he doesn't want to be with you specifically, but it also shows that if given the chance, he really would kick you to the curb and go with another woman in an instant. And then he goes ahead and makes up dating profiles for the both of you, almost immediately at that, by the way. That's really sketchy in my opinion. So it really makes me think, was he doing this before and now he's asking for an open relationship so he can continue to do stuff like this? Because that's honestly what popped into my head. And also the fact that he's trying to double back and be like, psych, this really was a test and you failed, is, in my opinion, proof enough that this guy is not emotionally mature and he is not ready for a girlfriend. So you know what? In my opinion, if I was in your shoes, I would be making plans to absolutely go traveling. If he doesn't like it and if this really is the end of your relationship, then in my opinion, it's for the best. This guy does not sound like a good boyfriend in the slightest, no matter what you try to say in that last paragraph. And hopefully you can see that sooner than later. My entitled superior in the Air Force forces me as well as my crew members to dismantle and go on a wild goose chase looking for a pair of pliers that he hid on his own. But thankfully, I get my revenge and I put him in his place in a beautiful manner. Here's what happened. So I was an inspection specialist serving in the United States Air Force, and this was way back in the early 80s. I had been assigned a sweet 30-day temporary duty to England. I had a large box of equipment that I brought over in order to support the daily maintenance of our aircraft. The way it worked out is that I would work out of the local test lab at the base that we were stationed at. I come into the lab and I'm met by some real cool airmen that help me get my box moved in and briefly give me the rundown on who's cool and who isn't. And the shop chief is not on the cool list. And it becomes very apparent when he finally shows up to see who the visiting airman is. The chief is one of those people that think they're above you for whatever reason. Bottom line is that he was despised by his crew. I needed to borrow a pair of pliers in order to loosen up some bolts that was holding the equipment box lid on. So I got a pair from their toolbox and got to work unpacking. It was a Friday and I was eager to get done with it so I could sample the English culture firsthand. In my haste to get out the door, I failed to return the pliers to the toolkit, which is a huge no-no when you're in the Air Force and have access to a working flight line. All tools have to be accounted for at the end of each shift. This is to prevent a lost tool from either being left inside an airplane or left on the ground, just waiting to be sucked up into the intake of the jet engine. And I get this and I'm totally good with the rules. Anyways, I had to come into the lab on Saturday and I was told that the pliers were left out and are missing. Normal protocol demands that I report the missing tool to the dispatch office and they would shut down the flight line until either the tool was found elsewhere or it was verified that it wasn't on the flight line. I decided to forego that part because I knew that the pliers never left the room we were in and we were located well over a quarter of a mile from the flight line. Myself, as well as the guys assigned weekend duty, spent several hours scouring that entire lab for those pliers. We moved everything out of a couple of rooms, checked in every box and container, and even looked in all the desks, except for one, and that was the shop chief's desk, and it was locked. I made the comment that we should x-ray his desk just to make sure, and as a side note, we had the capacity to perform mobile x-ray inspections. We came back that Sunday and looked through everything again and still didn't find them. Monday comes around, and the shop chief asked us if we had any luck finding the pliers. We told him no and explained everything that we did. He told us to try one more time, so off we go to repeat the process for the third time. However, as I was moving stuff in the room where I originally thought I lost the pliers, I spot them on the floor behind the wheel of a cart that I had moved out of that room 2 times before. I quietly let the crew know that I found them and told them that the shop chief must have been holding them. So I picked them up and I put them in my pocket, and I told the crew not to say a word. And it's right about now that my malicious compliance comes into play. We went ahead and cleared everything out of the room, as in totally empty. I called the shop chief over and I told him that the room was cleared and we didn't find the pliers. He walks over to the door of the room and I'm tracking where his eyes go. And he looks in the exact spot where he put the pliers and literally jumps up a bit like he was startled. And it was right about then that I really started to lay it on thick. I tell him that the only place we haven't looked was in his locked desk and how I was tempted to x-ray it, but now we have to call dispatch since the pliers have been missing for over 2 days, that the flight line must be shut down, and so on and so on. And the entire time I'm acting like I'm about to panic because we could damage an airplane and compromise the mission. I just let it rip, and the entire time I watched his face get redder and redder until he finally fesses up and admits to hiding the pliers. I then laid into him a lecture about playing games and how he started this game and now he wants to whine when I played the same game with him. Now keep in mind that this jerk outranked me, but he realized that I had him by the neck because if he went after me for some kind of insubordination, then he would have to explain a tool going missing for over 2 2 days, all without reporting it. So in the end, I was the hero of the crew, and the shop chief left me alone for 27 more days that I was there. But it truly was awesome to see karma come his way and put him in his place in a beautiful manner. The shop chief is so toxic. They literally wasted everybody's time that weekend and made them move every single item out of that shop just to find those stupid pliers that he was holding on to. Like, think about it. This is a shop that the Air Force uses. So that means they basically wasted their time going through every single object in that room to try and find these stupid pliers. And yeah, it's kind of on the original poster for not having it off to the side and in its proper place before they left. But at the same time, this shop chief literally went out of their way to waste everyone's time just to play some stupid game. That's not fair for anybody in the slightest. And when it comes to the original poster, yeah, this guy was outranking you. You played a serious gambit and basically being like, oh, you're gonna try and tell on me? Well, I'm gonna do the exact same thing to you and explain to the higher ups why you were hiding a tool for 2 days. Like, that's honestly super childish, and there's no reason to do that to your crew. So good for the original poster for standing up for themselves. Because from the sounds of it, this shop chief absolutely had it coming. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.